If these stories help you sleep, tap the like, hit subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from. Bonus points. What's the temperature outside your window right now? Your eyes open to a sky the color of hammered tin dot. It's October 1836. High in the Rocky Mountains, where the air tastes like iron and pine. The aspens have already gone from trembling gold to bare grey sticks scratching at a cloud, ceiling that's slouching closer each hour. You're Elias Hart, 27, former riverboat carpenter out of Ohio who traded river fog for mountain wind 3 seasons back. You didn't plan to become a winter. Nobody plans it. But after spring's beaver fetched less than the powder you burned to get them. After a late summer fever took the partner who knew the trail to tear. After your last 2 mules went lame and hail that dropped from a July sky like God's own buckshot well, here you are. Building your life 1 log and 1 breath at a time. The cabin is your backbone and your wager. 16 by 10. Hand peeled. Lodge poles stacked tight. Dovetailed corners you learned from an old Frenchman with a silver tooth. The roof is your best guess at survival purlins crosspoles. Then bark, boughs, and 2 inches of stamped down clay. Smoke finds its way out of a square hole, then sometimes decides not to. Everything is held together by will, friction, and pine pitch. You swing your legs off the bed, a tick mattress stuffed with bunchgrass that wants to jab every inch of you that isn't callous. The floor is cold enough that your breath forms a white ribbon when it hits the boards. Where the light from a small oiled paper window falls, the dust looks like snow already practicing. Finn O'Rourke, 17, fierce with freckles and bad at hiding his hunger mumbles from the other bed frame, blanket hauled to his ears. He isn't your blood, but he is your winter. Same as the axes and the powders and the pelts strung from the rafters like brown ghosts. Up, you say. Wind's changing. He sniffs and sits. Smells like rain. You tilt your head. It's not rain. It's Chinook warm breath sliding over cold bones, but wrong season, wrong direction, and brief as a liar's promise. You know it in your sternum. The last gentle air you'll feel for a long time. Outside, frost spangles the meadow, each blade of grass wearing a tiny knife. Your woodpile pine and a precious seam of aspen isn't, a pile so much as a to-do list in 3 dimensions. Get this high and live. The old trappers in the rendezvous meadow talked numbers like they were prayers. 20 chords for the high valleys. More if your chimney's greedy. You've got 8. You tell yourself it's enough if you don't waste. You tell yourself that as if waste isn't what winter calls breathing. The morning is for triage. You and Finn split, stack, split, stack until your shoulders sing and your palms remember every blister they've ever met. The rhythm is a metronome you can lean your life against. Lift, set, drive, twist, pop, breathe. The wedges bloom frost where you touch them with bare fingers by mistake. You learn not to mistake. Break for water, break for jerky. Break for a joke that isn't a joke. If I die, Finn says. You can have my socks. He grins, then sobers. Because men have died on jokes smaller than that, and for reasons less clear. On the south wall, the chinking has slumped into a map of future wind. You fetch the bucket where yesterday you mixed mud with chopped grass and a little ground charcoal the way Tava, the Ute hunter, showed you last spring. He came quiet as dusk and left the same. Brought you salt when the elk went scarce. Said almost nothing. Taught you everything. Mush the chinking in with your fingers until they ache, then tamp with a flat stick. You smear pitch over a tiny gap at the sill log and feel the instant your home gets an ounce less cruel. Finn is at the door with the latch lifted. Smoke's weird. Smoke is winter's barometer. When the draft is right, it takes the smoke by the neck and lifts it toward the sun. Today the smoke hesitates, then slides along the rafters like a stray cat looking for alternate exits. You shorten the damper, tweak the fire, add punky wood for more columns, more things, because small things decide whether your lungs get to see April. Inventory next. This is the liturgy. Powder horn, 3/4 full. Lead, 26 balls. 5 more if you cut new patches and pour careful. Caps, you run a flintlock, so no caps, but the frizzen needs a polish. Meat, 1 parfleche of smoked venison, 3 lengths of elk, dried hard as pine, 2 sacks of white beans, 1 of cornmeal. Coffee, the kind of small miracle that makes a man remember God. You have enough for 1 decent mug a week if you stretch. Salt, thin. Grease, rendered elk fat in a jar that looks like a candle and burns like hope. You fix the latch with a hammered nail you've straightened twice. You scrape the ice from the inside of the window with your thumbnail. You recite to yourself the only math problem that matters: how much heat you can pull from dead trees before the living mountain takes it back. By midday, the cloud ceiling lowers, sags, and breaks on the ridge like surf. The first snow is not a storm, just a statement of intent. Scattered flakes that melt on your wrists and then, crucially, stop melting. You and Finn lug in armloads, and then 1 more. You bank the hearth and hang a kettle so the cabin carries its own weather. The light goes from pewter to lead. Traps. Finn asks, "We run them at last light," you say. After we check the line by the creek bank. What about the beaver pond? You picture the pond, flat as a mirror and twice as mean. Ice might be skimmed there, thin as a lie. A foot wrong and you're under, and the world is a cold you can't think your way out of. Not today. You spend afternoon hours in the settling dark of the cabin, making small things that raise the odds. Mending the rawhide web of your snowshoes with sinew you softened in your cheek. Cutting willow lengths to brace the roof poles. Whittling a new peg for the rifle's ramrod. Winter rewards men who respect boring work. It kills the ones who only respect courage. Finn hums. It takes you a moment to realize the tune is from back east something, with words about spring. You let him hum, and you sharpen until the knife wants to bite anything. When the edge is right, you can see your face in it, but you try not to look. You don't like what the mountains have written there. Not age. Exactly, but subtraction. At last light, you run the nearest set line. A fox gives you his winter, strings of red fur and sinew and a smell like pennies. You thank him aloud because that's a habit that costs nothing and returns something you cannot name. 2 rabbits, 1 sprung empty trap, 1 trap stolen by a trickster of unknown species coyote. Wolverine, a clever wind. You reset, rub snow into your hands, cut your prints with a spruce bow, and go home with meat and the knowledge that the mountains take a tax on everything. Back in the cabin, you skin by firelight. The blade moves like it belongs to the hand. Finn works the bow drill on a block of pitch to make a fresh glue for the moccasin soles. The smell is church and thunder. Grease hisses in the pan. You fry thin slivers of venison and call it supper because the word puts weight in a man's belly that meat alone can't. Night stoutens and lays across the roof. You talk about the plan for tomorrow. Cut the dead pine on the north ridge. Set the second line in the drawer. Check the creek ice. Boil beans. Sharpen the broad axe, adjust the door seal. The list is longer than daylight. It always will be. Before sleep, you go outside and listen to the snow-speak mountain. The sound is not silence. It's small, earnest noises. A twig cracking under white weight. A far owl telling an old story to new mice. The creek whispering beneath a lid of ice. The wind shifts, and you smell something that makes your ribs remember being softer. Wood smoke that isn't yours. Finn is at your shoulder. Breath like a train of small clouds. Do you smell? I do. On the ridge, a thread of grey unspools and climbs and then frays. Someone's fire. Someone's life that might be trouble or might be a lifeline. In the Rockies, both probabilities show up with the same hat on. Tomorrow, you say. We can't wander in the night. Finn nods, trying to look like a man and not a kid with hunger for voices inside. You bank the fire like it's a child you trust, but not entirely. You sleep in layers. Will, hide, habit. A knife under the pallet, and the rifle on pegs where your hand will find it without waking your brain. Your last thought is the smoke on the ridge and the way the sky seemed to lean. Before dawn, you jerk awake to a sound you've never heard in this cabin. Not the wind, not a crack, not a wolf's question or a cougar's punctuation. It is a long, low groan from above your head, followed by the soft, treacherous hiss of weight beginning to move. Roof. You breathe. Then it comes, an avalanche in miniature. Snow and ice and clay sheeting off the roof with a sound like a river changing its mind. The cabin shudders. The door jams in its frame. Finn is already on his knees, eyes wide in the firelight that's gone sullen, and as the last of the roof load slides, the ridge answers with a second, sound farther off, deeper. The kind of voice a mountain uses when it wants to be obeyed. You look at the oiled paper window. The light outside is wrong, too white, too heavy. You understand before you say it. Blizzard, you tell the boy. And she's early. If you're listening somewhere warm right now, drop A in the comments. And tell me your backup plan if your power went out tonight. Asterisk. If you're new here, you just dropped into a blizzard. Smash that bell so you don't miss what comes next. Tell me which state you'd choose to winter in if you had to. Montana, Colorado, Wyoming, or nope, put me on a beach. When the door finally gives, it's because you make a wedge from a scrap of oak and persuade the swollen jam with the little hammer that has saved your life 3 times and bruised your thumb 40. Snow pours in around your boots like a dog that knows it's not supposed to be inside. The drift against the door is belly high and still rising. The wind takes the breath from your mouth and throws it aside as useless. Keep it cracked, you tell Finn, who is trying to hold the door with a strength his frame doesn't advertise. Let the cabin breathe. We die if she can't. He nods, face raw already. You lash a loop of rawhide from the latch to a peg to keep the door from slamming shut and sealing your fate. The cabin is a lung. You are its winter doctors. The first patient is always the same. The fire for hours. That's how long a sensible fire holds if you bank it right at midnight with good splits and a prayer. And that's the rhythm winter lays across you. Waked and sleep, waked and sleep. If wind sucks the draft wrong or a coal collapses in sulky rebellion, for becomes 2. If you were too tired to hear the shift in the fire's voice, 2 becomes none. And none becomes a kind of quiet that never ends. You stir the coals gently and mutter to them, like a man coaxing a skittish horse. Pine kindling first in dry, patient and Then a aspen splits so the fire remembers how to climb. Pitch crackles and pops. Smoke considers you from under the mantle and then concedes upward. You feel the moment hope stops being theory and starts being heat on your knuckles. Breakfast is a word that pretends to be bigger than it is. Hot water. A finger of coffee grounds set to boil and then strained through a strip of muslin that remembers being a shirt. The first sip is ruinously good, and you tell Finn a lie you both enjoy that you don't miss baked bread, or butter, or the kind of morning where you can step outside barefoot and not die. The lie does its job. It keeps the boy from counting dot. Outside is a world made slant. Snow doesn't fall. It flies sideways, upwards, in tight white spirals that obey a physics written by a cold god. A spruce leans and gestures with its elbow. The ridge, a mile off, is gone, replaced by a blank page. If you walk into that page, the mountain will write your ending in 3 lines. Cold, quiet, done. You shorten the list for the day. No creek, no Northridge pine, no traps past the first stand. Instead, keep the roof alive, keep the fire honest. Keep your meat from turning into a magnet for things with teeth. You lash a pole and step into the white, with Finn's mitten pinched between your own. The two of you, a single creature with 4 legs and 1 stubborn heart. The roof groans again, a long sigh, and then a chunk slides. You probe the eaves with the pole and knock loose the build-up before it becomes a threat. The snow falls in a slab that would crush a man's chest if he were napping wrong inside. And you make a note, literal one, scratched with charcoal on a board nailed to the wallabout, adding a stronger brace in spring. Planning for spring in a blizzard is not optimism. It's medicine, back inside. You take stock of the small weakness you'll have to strengthen. The smoke holes, collar icing over. The latch tending to freeze. The seam in the south wall that has started to weep a thin, ghostly thread of snow dust. Finn sees it too. Chinking's cold cracked. Get the ash bucket. You learned this trick from an Arapaho woman at Green River. Sifted ash fine and dry makes a temporary filler that snow cannot flow through. You pack the seam gently with warm ash, then cap it with a smear of softened pitch. The leak stops. The cabin becomes itself again, less a box in a storm than a small, stubborn country with its own laws. Hours disappear the way sparks do, up the flue and into theory. The light outside is the same whether it is noon or midnight whiteness that wants your eyes to guess. You argue with time by doing things that insist on order. Hang the rabbit skins near the rafters where they will dry. Scrape the fox while the hide is still willing. Boil beans until they stop pretending to be stones. Rub tallow into the rifle stock where tiny cracks try to be big. Finn coughs. It's nothing and then a warning. Winter takes pride in turning coughs into eulogies. Drink, you say, handing him a tin of boiling then-cold water with a sprig of willow in it for the bitter that chases. Fevers out of boys who want to be men. He makes a face and drinks anyway. The wind hits a new note lower, darker, like a fiddle string scraped with a coin. You and Finn look at each other and then up. The mantle trembles. The clay between roof poles pops like knuckles. You grab the pole and head out again, and the cold tries to shear your breath from your lungs at the threshold. The eaves have loaded in minutes. You jab, pry, and portions of the roof shed in slumps that thump the ground and then slither away in the wind. Across the meadow, movement. Not the ragged dance of a bush trying to move without roots. Not the broken lurch of a branch, but something alive, low, and purposeful. Finn's back stiffens through the rawhide line you've looped between your belts. Wolves. Maybe you count by instinct, 1 shadow, then 2, then 4. A 5th, larger, with a gait that reads as calm because it can afford to be. They stop outside the pale the wind has scoured clean. Yellow eyes, half shut against blown snow, regard the two of you with an interest that isn't hunger yet, but that has room to become it. They are winter's deputies, enforcing laws you don't like, but must respect. Get inside, you say quietly. Slow, don't show your back. You back into your door, and the wolves don't follow, but they don't leave. They settle on their haunches, like councilmen scheduled for a vote. The big one moves forward 2 paces and sniffs, then looks beyond you past your shoulder, toward the rafters, meat. The smell has leached. The blizzard is a bellows. You bar the door and then double the bar with a wedge. Finn is pale in the fire glow that can't decide if it's light or just memory of light. They'll leave, he asks, voice careful. You'd like to say yes. The mountain encourages you to decline that lie. Maybe the afternoon is a knot you can't loosen, so you cut it with work. You lower the meat from the rafters and lash what you can into a cache that's a ladder's reach up the inner gable where scent will still go, but the wolves cannot. You hang the rest deeper inside, and then smudge the smoke hole with green spruce needles to put a veil between your food and the word that food means in a wolf's head. The wolf's pace. You pace. The wind paces you both. Evening looks like morning and sounds like midnight. You tell Finn a story instead of a truth, about a man at Snake River who overbuilt his woodpile and used the extra to brew coffee for anyone who came by, and how he never lacked for visitors and somehow never ran out. The story holds a lesson. Finn hears the coffee. When the dark should be deepest, there's a bang on the north wall sharp. Wrong, human. Not snow load, not a falling limb. Something thrown or someone pushing. Finn's rifle is on the pegs before you finish thinking the word danger. You make your voice flat. Don't fire unless I say. Powder's worth lives. A second bang. Then a voice so raw it sounds like rope. Hello, the cabin. You freeze not from cold, but from the way the voice phrase. Men up here are careful with their throats. Sound is heat, and both are rare. This voice throws itself away. You unlatch and wedge and lift the bar. The door shoves against drift and opens into a white world with a man in it. He is tall, bent, hard to count because snow has disguised him as something more than human. Fur cap, ice-rusted beard, eyes bright in a way fever makes dot behind him. The wolves, not charging, watching him the way they watch injured elk. Their patience cruel because it is efficient. Name. You ask because names are anchors. Solomon Keats, the man says, swallowing on ice. Trapline North Ridge. Broke my snowshoe. Took all day to crawl the long way round. Fires out. Can't he stops because his voice has been stolen. You step back. It feels like letting weather in. It is letting weather in. There's a mental arithmetic you do without moving your lips. More bodies mean more heat and more hunger. More hands mean more hours you might live. You gesture anyway, because decency is a habit, and habits are heats of their own. Get inside, you say. Leave your outer things. Keep your boots until your feet tell you otherwise. He staggers through, leaving a comet tail of snow. Finn shuts and bars. The wolves nose the crack in the door and then drift backward their disappointment. Casual because time is their ally. Keats collapses near the hearth, careful even in his collapse to not kick the embers. That tells you more about him than his name. He holds his hands over the heat, too close, and you shove them back an inch because frostbitten skin burns easy and dies easier. Slow, you say. Stagger it. Heat. Snow. Heat. Snow. He nods in gratitude that's almost apology. Every winter has a grammar. He speaks yours. When he can talk, he proves he can also think. Wolves had me measured, he says. They've been on the north since yesterday. Big grey leads. Won't press a cabin, I figure. Press a man who can't run. Finn offers a tin of broth. Keats drinks like it's a church, and he's been allowed back inside. Then he leans his head against the log and closes his eyes in a way that says he's walking the hill between sleep and death, and isn't sure which side is warmer. Keep him awake, you tell Finn stories. Ask names anything. Finn nods and does it questions about where Keats set his winter line, whether he ever saw the great bison herds before they learned to fear gunsmoke. If it's true that, in St. Louis, a man can buy a dozen eggs and a hot bath on the same street. Keats answers between shivers. His words shore him up from the inside. Outside claws rake the log below the window. Not frantic, investigatory. You lift the rifle, count lead in your head, decide restraint is cheaper than pride. Then the wind drops half a pitch and drives smoke back into the room with the flourish of a conquering general. Your eyes sting. Your lungs remember a boyhood cough in a city you pretend you never lived in. You kick the damper wide and the fire brightens, then sulks, then accepts the new bargain. The night works its wicked clock. Every 4 hours you feed the fire. In between, you make plans that will matter if you live long enough to use them. Cut windbreak poles when the blow gives you an hour. Lash a meat cache in that pine if the trunk can take weight. Repeg the door latch so one good drift can't imprison you in your own coffin. You move like a man balancing plates in a windstorm. The trick is never to think you've got enough plates. The trick is to never drop the fire. Near dawn, the hour where confidence is weakest, the wolves lift their voices. Not a hunt song, not the panicked yip of a chase. A long, layered keening that makes Keats crack open one eye and Finn clamp his jaw like he's biting a bit. What is it? He whispers, you listen. The hair on your arms listens with you. Not us, you say. Something else. The wind holds its breath. From the white, another sound rises. Not animal. Not weather. A deep, syncopated thumping that clarifies into a rhythm you've only heard twice in 3 years, and never this early in. Winter.avalanche. Not on your slope. Not on your ridge. On the far wall where the beaver pond sleeps under its glass. When it goes like a cupboard full of stone plates thrown down a staircase. The earth under your boots shivers and finds a new stance. The wolf's song breaks, then resumes in a note that sounds like mourning or warning or both. Finn's hand finds your sleeve. The pond, he says, barely air. Our trapline. You're already lacing boots. Where are you going? Keats croaks, suddenly awake because pain is an alarm clock. You check the rifle, check the wedge at the door, check your breath, to see what the mountain just took. The boy shakes his head. You can't. You put a hand on his shoulder, the way men do when they're willing to be cruel for a reason. For hours to fire, you say. If I'm not back by the second, you make it a big one. You push into the white. If you're still with me, you're built for this. Drop "I'm still here" in the comments so I know my winter crew is awake. Asterisk, if you're listening with your eyes closed, keep them that way. Picture the door behind you, the fire on the edge of sulking, and the whole world ahead of you, a moving wall of white. You step into it like a diver hits water, whole body tightened, lungs preemptively scolding, senses reaching. Stormblind is not the same as blind, it's worse. The snow crowds your eyelashes with ice and then cements them, so you blink against a prison that keeps building itself. You carry the pole in your left hand, the rifle down and forward in your right, angled so the barrel doesn't ice instantly. You tie your lifeline 20 yards of rawhide from your belt to the peg just inside the door. Finn tightens the knot and raps twice on the wood. You answer with the same rap on your own ribs. A language of knocks you invented in June for fun, not knowing November would need it. The first 20 yards are easy because you built them that way. Posts at shoulder height you can find with a gloved palm, like a blind man's city street spelled out in wood. After the lines end, the world becomes a map that wants to erase itself as you read it. You count steps 400 to the poplars that lean like old men, 100 more to the creek where the wind has shaved the drifts down into hard white dunes. The wolves have settled to the left, a blurred congregation you can feel even when you can't see. They are shapes, then suggestions, then just the sense that you are not alone and maybe never will be again, even when you want to be. Their leader, the big grey that walks like a verdict, paces once across your imagined path and then stops. He lifts his muzzle, sniffs the wind, and gives one short bark that gets eaten by the gale. You file it with all the words you don't yet understand. The avalanche hasn't touched your slope, but sound travels through bone as easily as air. You feel its echo in your teeth. You press on, using the pole like a third leg and a blind man's question. The drifts are layered with lies, soft on top, hard below, then softer again. Each step wants to be your last, or maybe just your lesson. You plant the pole, lean, test, step. Plant, lean, test, step. You mutter the litany of men who outlived numbers. I will be where my feet are. I will be where my breath is. I will be where the fire is when the fire becomes a place again. The creek shows as a darker band in the stormer sentence underlined in charcoal. Already the edges are overhung with new snow that can't bear a sparrow, much less a man, and it wants to look like ground. You beat it back with the pole until the truth reveals itself. Water running black under a lid, angry, alive. You respect it with a step back and a nod. A man can salute a river. It will not salute him back, but sometimes it doesn't kill him, which is its own kind of courtesy. You skirt the creek into the notch where low willows huddle like a congregation that lost the hymn and kept the silence. Then you see it, the white slope beyond the beaver pond, now a broken page. The avalanche shaved the hill clean and raked it into a heaped, dirty wave at the valley bottom. The pond itself, which had been a black plate with a sugar glaze of early ice, has become a churned mess of ice cakes and sweepings. The beaver house a dome of sticks and mud fused into tough sticks out of the wreck like a stranded ship's hull. One of your trap stakes is bent into a parenthesis. The rest is gone beneath a story the mountain wrote without asking for your edit. You crouch in the lee of a spruce, using its trunk for a sentence break in the storm. You take stock in the way that matters, what you can save, what you must mourn, what you should pretend you never had. The line's a loss, probably. The pond will be a death magnet for a week. Broken ice hiding air pockets and weak places, Every footstep a chance to fall through into the cold that hands out quiet like a midwife. But the avalanche slowed, as a war in the night might have done you to favors. It knocked down a stand of dead timber on the far slope, and it made predators cautious. Anything that roars like that resets the forest. Heart, you turn to mark the way back, and that's when you see a shape at the edge of the slide. Not wolf, not elk. A man's line, shoulders curved against the wind, one leg dragging. He's a blot that the white keeps trying to erase. Your first thought is Blackfoot, because of last winter's stories and the way all men, when frightened, make strangers by default. Your second thought is that strangers freeze, too. You wave. He doesn't respond. You step out from the tree line and the storm punches inside your hood like a hand. You try again, this time with your voice, and the wind carries it sideways to the creek. The man half turns. He waves something that might be an arm or a stick. Then the snow goes between you like a curtain. You move slow, feeling for the creek's buried bends with the pole, angling for the broken white sea the slide left behind. Scramble up the slab, slide, cut sideways, plant, heel, pant. The rhythm becomes everything. Plant, heel, pant. Plant, heel, pant. You make it to the place you think he was, and then again the white shows you what it thinks of memory. Nothing there. Hello. You bellow, and the storm answers with its long, wordless no. Then a different sound, off to your right, faint and wrong, wood clacking wood. You aim for it, and nearly drop into a pocket of air where the slide's churn hit a trough. You throw yourself backward, and the pocket collapses into a black mouth that coughs out a smell like wet fur and old food. You inch forward on your belly and peer down. The man is in the pocket wedged. Not far, half-trapped beneath a lattice of beaver sticks. His hat is gone. His hair is a white cap made by the storm. His beard is spiked with ice. His eyes are open and level as a gun barrel. He isn't shivering, which is bad. Shivering is the body refusing to negotiate. Stillness is surrender. Don't move, you say. I'll come to you. He snorts a laugh, that's more a rattle. Not going anywhere. You don't waste breath on argument. You slide the pole across the gap, anchoring one end on your side and the other on a hump of debris. You test it, it holds. You belly crawl out, spreading your weight. Snow sifts into your hood as if the sky is full of flour and you are bread that needs correcting. You reach him. His eyebrows relax as if your face is a kind thing he'd forgotten existed. Name. You ask, because it matters. Jasper, he says. The wind steals the rest. Jasper's something. The something is drowned in a cough. Elias, you tell him, because that's something a man can hold. You check the tangle. One stick has him pinned at the hip. Another is across his shin. You wedge the pole under the upper stick and lever. It shifts to little. You lever again, and something in your left shoulder pops, like a knuckle where no knuckle should be. The stick moves enough for him to drag his leg free. He doesn't scream, which tells you he either can't or is made of a material that deserves a better world than the one he got. Give me your arm, you say, and he does. His skin is waxy and cold enough that your glove sticks for a hideous second, then peels. You pull him onto the pole and then beyond it, inch by inch. And your back speaks a language you thought you'd forgotten. Every word is an oath. Every sentence an apology to the vertebrae you've been punishing for 3 years. The wolves appear on the edge of the slide, grey commas punctuating the storm. The leader watches without moving, head low, tail down, not sneaking, not cringing, just saving energy, which is the only coin Winter trusts. He takes one step closer, then stops, as if he has decided the mountain wrote enough death today. Jasper helps best by not helping. He lets you haul him. He doesn't fight the pulls. He only breathes when breathing is possible. When you drag him into the lee of the spruce, he sags against it and closes his eyes. You slap his face gently. No, he opens them, not offended. Not yet, he says, as if agreeing to an appointment. You got a fire. I do, then I'll live, he says, like he's placing an order with a bartender for something. They might not stock. You haul him to his feet and hook your arm under his. He's a long man and denser than he looks. A frost-stiff scarf is wrapped twice around his neck. You pull it up to cover his mouth so his lungs don't split on their next attempts at gratitude. The first steps are a prayer you don't know the words to. The next steps write the prayer for you. Behind you, the wolves slide sideways, ghosting the storm, neither leaving nor closing in. The leader lifts his head and huffs a breath that steams into air fast enough to vanish. The creek is the problem and the pole is the answer. You plant the pole through the new snow to test the ice. You hear the hollow sound of a drum you don't want to fall into. You shift 10 feet, test again, find a deeper note. You cross with steps so small they'd embarrass a dancer and so crucial they'd impress a doctor. On the far bank, you pick up your rhythm, plant, heel, pant, heel, pant. You talk just enough to keep Jasper awake. Where were you set? South Draw, he says. Martin Line. Avalanche took the top trail, heard it before it hit. Thought the sky was falling. Maybe it did, alone. He laughs, the shortest laugh. Not anymore. The cabin fence post shows as a dark tooth. And you nearly weep like a drunk who sees a church door when he ran out of lies. You've been out less than an hour. Your body says it's been a season. You bang the door with your boot. Finn is already there, fingers at the latch, face pale and fierce. You spill Jasper into the cabin the way men throw a body into a boat. Keats's eyes widen. He lifts a blanket with a gallantry that would have made a fancy parlor proud. Strip him, you say. Slow, rub, don't thaw too fast. Jasper grins at no one you can see. I'm in Ohio, he tells the ceiling. Spring, corn up to my knees. You're in the Rockies, Finn says. Gentle but firm, and your ears might stay attached if you help us. They do. You work, boots off, without pulling skin. Mittens away from fingers, like you're unwrapping a present you can't afford to tear. You place his feet between your palms and feel the absence of heat give way to the idea of it. You feed him broth and burn your own tongue rushing the spoon. He swallows automatically and then with intent. He looks at you. Thank you, he says, and the words are satisfying because they cost him. Save it, you reply. You can thank us in cordwood. The door strains in a gust and then shudders like an animal with a bad dream. The wedge holds. You put another wedge in because a man who survived to his late 20s knows the mountain eats backups for breakfast. Revived by the drama, gives Jasper his place near the hearth and shifts to the wall without complaint. The two men regard each other like old dogs in a new yard. Nostrils, eyes, the shared acknowledgement that they will live longer together than apart. Finn feeds the fire and swallows a cough that hasn't earned the right to be loud. Wolves, Keats asks. Still there, they'll stay till the wind shifts, he says. Then they'll go find something that broke in the slide and make sure it doesn't get back up. You nod and add that to winter's ledger of true things. The blizzard spends itself like a spoiled lord. A lot of shouting, much throwing of white cloaks, and eventually, out of sheer exhaustion, a kind of sullen quiet. By evening, the world outside is still howling, but less sure of its metaphors. Inside, you feel confident enough to make beans interesting with a slice of fat and a handful of the last onions you dried in September. The smell is something a man could marry. Jasper, now on the right side of Shiver, watches the steam with a gratitude you recognize. Food as proof that the next hour exists. I owe you, he says. Everyone owes everyone in winter, you say. You pay by spring. He nods and swallows a spoonful so hot it makes his eyes water in a way he is too proud to admit his pain. You look at the three men in your 10x16 life: the boy who decided to be brave, the trapper who refused to die, the wanderer who got lost at the right time. Realize your problems have multiplied, but your odds just got better. More hands, more stories, more reasons to keep the fire argumentative than because. The mountain believes in timing like a storyteller. Another sound crosses the wind's throat. Not a howl, not snow slap, a sharp, metallic ping that's too clean to be accident. Finn looks up. What was metal on metal, Keats says. Outside, trap spring. Jasper hazards. You all look at the oiled paper window where the white has thinned to glow. A shadow interrupts it, thin, high, and wrong. A human figure passing the pane, not quite stopping, not quite seen. And then the sound of something deliberate against your latch. Someone is at your door. If you're still here, drop "I keep the fire" in the comments. We are not done. Asterisk smash that like if you're holding your breath, because so are we. There's a knock, not the polite kind from a civilized street with neighbors and borrowed sugar. 3 knuckles, soft, then a pause, then 3 again. The kind of knock that says, I know you're there. I'm not sure I should be. You meet Finn's eyes. His rifle is already in his hands, cock not pulled, finger where it belongs along the wood, not the trigger. Keats shifts his weight, testing the leg that went to sleep and found pins. Jasper sits up because pride woke him, and pride has saved fewer men than it killed, but enough that you don't argue. You go to the door and put your mouth near the seam. Hello, the cabin, you call, beating the stranger to it. State your name. A voice answers that could belong to a minister or a thief. Marlowe, it says. Company man, the words sinter into your ear with heat and cold. Company American fur, or its cousins, means trade and law, and sometimes a law that thinks it's bigger than the mountain. It means winter help or spring trouble. It means a man who has obligations stamped on paper. Paper burns fine and fast, but men kill for it just the same. What do you want? You ask. You keep your tone like January cold and not surprised. Shelter, he says. For the night. We lost the lie. My men are 3 bends back. You do a different arithmetic now. Your fire is big enough for 4 men and their breath if you burn faster than you planned and ration tighter than you want. Your beans are enough for 3 if you call them stew, and for 5 if you call it a story, while each man holds a spoon. Your woodpile is a policy you can't default on. How many? You ask. 2 with me, he says. Maybe a 3rd if he made it through the drift. He was behind when we lost the sled. We're not green, he adds. as if the word has ever comforted a mountain just caught guns. Not for you, he says, which is not an answer and answers everything. You look back at your three. Finn's jaw is set, which is what boys do when they think they can arm a bone with intention. Keats's face is open in a way that doesn't mean naive, just done with lying to his own heart. Jasper, pale under stormburn, raises one hand as if weighing the room. He nods, once, the way a man does when he expects to regret a thing and intends to do it anyway. You unbar the door with your left hand and keep the right resting on the stock at your hip. The door opens into a world that immediately tries to come inside again. 3 men press into the gap and then through it like fish moving upstream until the current becomes a cabin. Snow falls off them in sheets. The boards drink it and steam. The one in front has a gent's coat under his furs. Black wool rubbed shiny at the elbows. Brass buttons dulled by weather. His hat was expensive until the mountain talked to it. He carries himself like he could sign your name and make you thank him. His beard is neatly trimmed, neater than the weather allows. His eyes are good, too good, counting things he shouldn't know. Marlowe, he says, by way of proof. He takes his glove off and offers a hand. It's calloused and warm. Not a clerk, a field man, or a good actor. You take it and squeeze once. Not friendly, not rude. The handshake of men who might need to be both later. The other 2 are more what you expected. One is a big Swede who looks like he can sleep standing up and has. The other is a narrow, nervous man with a scar that runs from ear to jaw and makes him look like he's listening only on one side. They shed their outer things with a soldier's speed. No fuss. Only sequence. Appreciate the roof, Marlowe says, standing near it and not seeming to mind that a seam in the clay between poles has just dripped dirty water down his collar. He gestures with his chin at Keats and Jasper. You've got your own winter as got. Whoever shows up alive, you say. Fair, he says. He scans the room and dismisses nothing, not even your poor knife stuck into a post because there was no better place for it. His eyes pause at Finn. Young, he says. The word is not an insult. Fast, Finn says, which is a young man's defiance and a truthful inventory. Good, Marlowe says. He looks at the fire and then at your wood. We'll pay. How? Goods at spring, he says. Or now. We carry some powder, salt, a spool of brass wire, maybe coffee if your God kisses you directly on the mouth. You smile despite yourself. He hasn't in a while. Then maybe I do instead, he says, and the room laughs because men alive in winter laugh when they can, even at lies that might save them. The wolves thump against the north wall in a way that isn't violence, just curiosity writ large. The Swede glances at the boards like he is seeing the wolves through them. Big ones, he says. Hungry ones, Keats replies. We have the meat. They have the patience. Marlowe warms his palms and looks over his shoulder at the door. Then beyond it, the way men do when they left more outside than they brought in. Third man. You ask Dre, he says. Quick on his feet, but stubborn in the head. Lost his snowshoe crossing a willow break, and refused to crawl because he didn't like the taste of it. He pauses. We told him to angle left for the low spruce if he got separated. We told him to sing. You listen because you always are. There is wind. There is the wood's small speech. There is your heart and Finn's and the other 3 you invited to dinner. There is no singing. How far? You ask. To bends, he says. Maybe 1.5 if you walk like I hope you do. Which way? He points in a direction only a winter man can point, through a wall like it's air, through a storm like it's a veil. By the dead snag that looks like a preacher. He gives a quiet smile. You know the one, you do. There's a sprig of dead aspen at the edge of the meadow that wears a crown of crooked branches like a hat a cruel god picked out for him. If you get to that snag and look where the wind carves the drift like a saddle, you can see the place where the creek doglegs into the willows. Men who know this ground know you can be foolish near that dogleg and live in summer. Winter charges more. Finn stays, you say. His mouth opens. You close it with a look. Keep the fire, you tell him. Count oxygen. Oxygen counts you. He nods like you gave him a medal, not a chore. You take your pole and your rope. You look at Jasper and Keats and Marlowe and the Swede and Scar. You have too many men and not enough certainty. 2, you say. No more. Fewer bodies to freeze. Fewer tracks to lose. I'm 1, Marlowe says, as if he was always going to be. The Swede gestures at the door with a lift of his chin. He doesn't use words for volunteers. You choose him because he's big and because he has the look of men who don't panic when the snow moves like water. Scar opens his mouth. Marlowe shakes his head once. Scar says nothing and rolls his neck the way men do who put their hands where orders tell them. You open the door into a storm that isn't proud anymore, just stubborn. The 3 of you tie off and go into it like the heads of a trident. You in front. Marlowe to your left. The sweet Jorma, he says, without asking for a better pronunciation, on the right. You angle for the preacher snag because men who don't aim for landmarks aim for graves. The wolves flood back into your periphery with the ease of water finding its level. The leader keeps pace, exactly 25 yards off. You don't measure it. Your nerves do. The snag appears like a judgment and then becomes wood again. You lean into it to breathe in an air pocket. Sing, Marlowe says. His voice is steady enough that you want to trust him more than you should. Dre, he calls. Sing, you stupid saint. You listen. Nothing. You move. 20 steps. 30. The creek hisses under its lid. Dre. You call, and the wind hands your shout back like a bad debt. HJALMAR. Halts, and points a flat hand. Low, like he's aiming a prayer. You squint along it and see at the very edge of the drifter line that isn't wind-made. A boot scrape, then another, then nothing, as if the man vanished vertical. The drift there looks smooth, but smooth is a false god. HJALMAR jabs with the pole. It goes in to the hilt, as if he stabbed a cloud that swallowed steel for breakfast. He pulls the pole back fast, and the hole exhales cold air like a man dying with a last insult on his tongue. Marlowe yells, and the hole answers, with a sound that is almost a word. It's not hope. Hope is bigger. It's proof. Proof is enough. You belly down to spread weight and slide to the hole. Dre, you say into it, and the hole speaks back in the language of lungs that forgot their job and are trying to get rehired. Hang on, you say, and you feed the rope into the mouth in a loop you can use to catch an arm or a shoulder or a mistake. Jorma flattens and anchors your ankles with his hands. Men become knots. Men become pulleys. Marlowe ties the other end of the line around his chest and leans back. Pull on it if you can, he tells the earth. Be your own hero a minute. The rope moves once, twice, then jerks in a way that makes you bite the inside of your cheek. You feed more. The rope pulls again, steady now, and a hand appears in the hole. It is blue-white and leather-torn and human-like an oath. You grab it and latch hard. Jewelmare hauls. Marlowe leans. The three of you, who have nothing in common except the wish to be alive tomorrow, become one creature with 6 arms and an intention. Dre erupts from the hole like a bad thought leaving a good man. He coughs a slab of snow and a paragraph of river water. His face is a color skin shouldn't guess at. His lashes are white bars. He tries to say thank you and produces a sound that could be that or knife. You thump his back carefully in the way that helps lungs remember. Up, Jewelmare tells him. And Dre obeys like a soldier who forgot war and remembered it You half drag, half carry him to the snag. You press your faces out of the wind and breathe together. Every 3 breaths, you make him talk. He says mother, he says warm. He says no more snow, which is the kind of wish men make when they are alive enough to lie, and not yet wise enough to know it. You look at Marlowe in the thin white light. He looks back, and for a second something unaccompanied slips through. Not gratitude, deeper recognition. Men who carried each other in a place that doesn't carry anyone move, you say. Before he starts seeing angels. The return is harder because it's always harder when you're dragging. A man whose blood just decided to continue. The wolves pace you. The leader keeps the distance exact as if he measured it with a string. When you reach the cabin yard, Finn is in the door with blankets like a priest with sacraments. He wraps Dre without asking permission, because permission is a summer concept. Inside, Dre goes near the fire and Color makes a tentative offer to his cheeks. Scar fetches coffee from a pouch and doesn't pretend it's charity. He lays the pouch on your bench like an altar. Trade, he says, and for once the word feels like mercy, not debt. Marlowe digs in his coat and produces something small wrapped in oilcloth. He hands it to you. You unwrap. Inside is a packet of needles, 3 sizes, steel true, points wicked. You didn't know how much you needed them until your chest goes loose with a joy so ridiculous. It borders on grief. For your boots, he says, and whatever else winter tears. You nod because words are suddenly too expensive. The fire climbs. The cabin breathes like it learned how without you. Men slurp and cough and swear quietly at their survival. You set the needles on the shelf like a priest sets relics. The wolves settle beyond the wall like a rumor that decided to stay. For an hour, maybe 2. There is nothing in the world but this heat, breath, food, and the knowledge that you chose to open a door and it didn't kill you. Then the wind changes. It isn't louder, just different. It comes from west to east now. The Chinook's ghost returning to walk through the hard air. The smoke lifts clean. The oiled paper brightens with moonlight like a promise. And with the wind, another sound rides in. One you didn't expect to hear until spring stomped its visa on the past horses. Not a lot. 3, maybe 4. Hooves muffled by snow and then ringing thin on ice, then muffled again. A jingle that's not quite spur, not quite tack. The cabin's men look at each other because horses in a storm are a sentence with too many blanks. Company men look at Marlowe. Marlowe looks at you, expecting anyone. He asks, already knowing the answer. You shake your head. Keats shifts his weight like a man thinking about whether his leg can run. Jasper sits up fully because his pride is now awake enough to vote. The horses stop outside the clearing. A voice calls, half mocking, half friendly, wholly dangerous because it knows how to be both. Hello, the cabin. Got room for a story and a bottle? You recognize the cadence before the name. A man you didn't expect to see till June. A man who can turn a winter with a smile and a lie. Sometimes in that order. By God, Keats whispers, eyes gone bright. Is that the door latch lifts from the outside? If you're riding with me, say I hear the horses in the comments. Want me to keep going straight into parts 5 and 6? I'll drop them next. Asterisk. The latch lifts like a man tilting his hat, casual, confident, careless of consequences. You catch the bar with your palm and hold it down. A cabin is a home, and a home has rules. Winter doesn't love a man who forgets them. Name, you say, loud enough to cut through the wind. A laugh answers, bright as coins, old as trouble. Name's the same as the last time a woman threw me out but still fed me breakfast, the voice says. Cade Hollis. Friend of nobody in particular and everybody in general. Least when my bottle's full. Keats exhales a laugh he didn't know he'd saved. Cade, he mouths. Like a man spotting a circus wagon in a town that's only ever met wagons with nails and bad news. Marlowe slides a glance, you'll weigh the kind of glance that measures not the man outside, but what the man means to the man who opens doors. Yours, he asks. Sometimes, you say, because Cade is like weather. Nobody owns him, but you still have to live under what he brings. You lift the bar. The door swings and winter reaches in with both hands. Cade steps through it as if he rented the storm for an entrance. He's leaner than you remember and more beautiful in the way stray dogs get when they've learned exactly how much of a snarl. Passes for a smile. His coat is a patchwork of other men's good decisions. His hat is beaver felt with opinions. He carries a bottle wrapped in burlap and a bow that might have been a lady's once, might have been a joke, might be both. He grins at Finn first, because Cade knows where rooms begin. You grew, he says. Finn shrugs, hiding a grin under the careful face he made for winter. You shrank. Cade hands him the bottle as if that exchange settled the last 3 years. He sweeps the room with a look that counts, not judges. Keats, he says, nodding like a man to a partner in an old sin. Still got 2 good eyes and 1 good idea. Keats snorts. Down to 1 eye and 2 ideas. You pick which is more dangerous. Cade's gaze lands on Jasper Petal. Thawing, wrapped like a parcel you can't afford to lose. You're half dead, he says, not unkind. Working on the other half, Jasper replies, not offended. Then Cade's eyes hit Marlowe and the company trio. The smile loses a tooth. Evening, he says. Not hostile. Not open. Marlowe does the polite thing his bones let him do. We met at the Knife Pass rendezvous, he says. You told a story about a horse that jumped a river and a girl who didn't. I don't remember which part made the men cry. Cade's grin returns, but it doesn't touch the back of his eyes. Depends who's listening, he says. Scar watches Cade like a wolf considers a fire. Respect, disdain, curiosity, hunger. Jalmar's face does nothing, which you find comforting. Men whose faces stay still while the world's face changes are rare and worth the wood they burn. You rebar the door. The wind tries it once more, then thinks better and goes to find someone who hasn't learned this trick yet. Cade hands Finn the bottle to set on the shelf, then produces, with magician's swag, from a saddlebag a brick of tea. wrapped in paper with characters that look like frost on glass. Traded down river, he says. Steeps 3 times. For if you like pretending, pretending's cheaper, Keith says. So is dying, Cade replies. And the room makes that small sound men make when a joke brings its own undertaker. He sheds his outer layers with grateful, human sounds, a man letting himself be something besides a silhouette. Under the patchwork, a decent wool shirt, clean enough to have known soap this side of summer. He lays his hat by the door and pats it like a dog that might run. Then he steps into the firelight's province and warms, his hands with a sigh that admits he wasn't sure he'd feel that again. How many horses? Marlowe asks, like a merchant counting glassware at a party nobody invited him to. 4, Cade says. To mine, to borrowed from a man who didn't need them as much as I did once I explained it to him. Explained with your mouth? Scar asks. Mostly, Cade says. Then with a rope. Same language, different grammar. You alone. You ask, Cade tilts his head. As a fact, with a boy who thinks I'm God and a woman who's sure I'm not, that rearranges the furniture in your head. A woman, out there now, under a tarp with more opinions than blankets, Cade says. She was farther behind till I smelled the creek shifting and made a choice. Left them at the willow hang-to, Benson, till I found a roof. I told the boy to sing if he got cold. He sings like a mule dragging a fence, so if you didn't hear him, either the wind ate it or he got smart and saved his heat. The room goes quiet the way rooms do when the calculation appears at the same time in 3 men's eyes. You just brought 1 man in from the teeth. Now there's a woman and a boy on the hook in the same storm. Marlowe doesn't wait for the ask. We go, he says, already pulling his gloves on, voice level as a plumb line. Swede, you're with me? Elias, leading Scar, opens his mouth. Marlowe's eyebrow kills the sentence. Scar shuts his mouth and starts wrapping scarves with the bitter efficiency of a man. Promoted from desire to duty, Jasper pushes himself upright. I can, he begins. No, you say. You can hold this cabin together by not dying in it. He hates you for a second, then knows you're right and hates you less, the way men do who want to be brave and must settle for being alive. I'll keep the fire, he says. I'll count the wood like it owes me money. Cade looks at you like a man looking in a mirror he didn't expect to show this angle. You could let the company do it, he says, not mocking. You could keep your tea and your wood and your needles. You could let the mountain take a tithe. I could, you say. But when the mountain comes calling for a tithe, it never leaves a receipt. That does something to him he covers with a grin. She's got a pistol, he adds, like a man remembering there's a punchline at the funeral. And the boy's got my second best knife. They'll make it if the creek doesn't lie. You throw the bar. Winter kisses your cheeks with teeth. The rope goes on like it belongs there. The pole returns to your hand like a sin you're good at and hate. The preacher snag again, hatted silhouette in a world made of white arguments. You aim for the willow hangware. A low sweep of branches makes a tent that sometimes says yes to men. The wind has shifted right enough that your shouts travel like clumsy birds. Who, you bellow, keep singing. A voice answers high, young, crack like a board not yet seasoned. Who? Good, Cade says under his breath. The mule found the fence. You angle left of the creek because you were born cruel enough to remember where it lies. The willow breaks into being humped white, a green suggestion, a brown shoulder where the wind combs. A tarp luffs. A boy's face, skinny and too brave, appears under it. Beside him, a shape that makes the room of your chest get smaller. A woman. Hat pulled low, scarf iced to her cheek. Pistol in hand like her hand grew around it. 2, she says, sighting down iron at your nose. Not fear, measurement. 3, Cade says. Stepping into her view, like a man walking out of a story some woman decided she didn't approve of anymore. For with me you can point that at. Her shoulders drop a fraction, then reset. She holsters, but doesn't forget. You respect both. Time to go, Marlowe says. Because truth is a short sentence when the world is like this. We move slow, the woman says. The boy lost a shoe. I tied rope. It holds if you don't make him hurry. What's the boy's name? You ask as you throw a blanket around his shoulders without making a show of softness. Orin, he says to Fast. Because boys say their names like they fear nobody else will, and yours. You ask the woman, May, she says. No apology, you nod because some names you salute. Jolma and Marlowe flank. You break trail in a shallow S that finds the small rises your feet no better than your mind. Cade takes the rear, talking to Orin in a low stream about the science of how a man keeps his toes, which is half empty lies and half beautiful truth. Orin hangs on the sound like it produces heat. May doesn't talk. She moves like a person who has learnt to listen to the snow with the soles of her feet. Her eyes flick across the drift, the willow, the ground you just packed, and the ground you're about to test. She is not new to hard. She is only new to this address. The creek tests your better judgment at its crossing, but the pole does what it was born for. And you lay the rope across and pull them, one by one, over the part where winter pretends to be summer, pretending to be winter. When May steps down, she never looks at the hole. She looks at the line and then at you. A nod that says, I'll remember the man who strung that across. I'll remember the creek that tried to keep me. Finn is a silhouette at the door when the cabin shows itself. Small and square and suddenly the most competent object in the world. May steps inside like a stage changes scenes. The wind becomes a wall. The wall becomes weather. The room becomes a decision. Orin is in before her, noise returning to a body that had to hide it. He looks at the fire like God just reinvented himself as an honest thing. He holds himself still because his mother taught him the difference between thanks and weakness. You see the effort and are gentle anyway. Jasper watches them with a tired smile and a flicker of something you haven't seen in his eyes since the thaw that never quite arrives, hope borrowed on bad credit. Scar pours coffee like a man measuring penance. The smell turns the cabin into a church. May wraps her hands around the tin and doesn't drink it yet, using it for heat first because smart is a religion too. She tips it back and makes a sound so small only the word lucky knows it exists. Why the mountains? Marlowe asks, not prying, not in love with silence. Why men? May returns, and the room laughs again because some answers hold because they don't. Cade stands just out of reach of the fire, where men who might leave again choose to live. He looks at Orin like a man who remembers being that alone and fails, and looks at May like a man who remembers being less alone and fails at that too. He turns toward you. There's another thing, he says, quiet enough that only you, Marlowe, and the corner hear. We crossed sign at the lower meadow. Not elk, not moose, not man moving because he wanted to be somewhere. Man moving because he always has been. Who? Marlowe asks. Blackfoot, Cade says. 5, maybe 7. Close together. Old snow in the prints and new on top, but not old enough. They're not hunting. They're circling for us. Keats asks, tone trying and failing not to tremble. For anyone who isn't them, Cade says, which includes us, until it doesn't. Marlowe's jaw goes hard. We had an exchange down valley, he admits. Not my doing. A man got shot. One of theirs took a ball. That bruise is walking. Jasper's eyes flick to you. You see memory standing behind them, wearing blood on its shirt. You see last spring's news filtered through this winter's cost. The room feels smaller by the size of a verdict. Do we owe them? Keats asks, voice soft, because some debts are the kind you pay in people. We owe everyone, you say. We just have to decide when payment is a fight and when it's a fire shared. May lifts her head, finishing the coffee with a deliberateness you recognize from men who carry more than gear. I've got no love for company law or camp law, she says. I've got love for my boy breathing. If talking keeps lungs full, I talk. If not, she touches the pistol with a finger that doesn't tremble. I stop talking. Cade raises the brick of tea like an offering to a god he mostly heckles. I vote talking, he says. Mostly because I'm prettier when I'm alive. Scar grunts. And cheaper to feed when you're dead, he says. Which is mean and true and earns him a slap on the shoulder from Jormar that might be affection, or might be an attempt to settle the math in the room. Finn has been quiet the way boys get when the present is heavy and the future is loud. Now he speaks. We need more wood, he says simply. If we're talking, we'll talk longer. If we're fighting, we'll burn faster. Already saw a stand, Cade says, hitching one shoulder. Lightning strike clearing at the south rise. Dry as a banker's smile. You can pull 3 cords out of it, if you can drag it. Marlowe nods, liking a man who provides both trouble and the tools to lift it. Tomorrow, he says, we cut till we've bled enough to make the cold feel like mercy. Then we choose the talk. Jasper coughs, a warning coughs, more but edged. You see him wince it back like a man sealing a letter he can't afford to send. May notices. Women who have kept boys alive notice everything that looks like a boy not yet gone fully into man. She finds a scrap of linen in a pouch and offers it without ceremony. Jasper takes it, and in the exchange a treaty writes itself. Small, present tense, unadorned. Night sets its chair by your door and decides it will be staying. The wolves outside lift a hymn that isn't hunger, not exactly more like attendance. The storm dwindles like a drunk deciding to sleep it off under a table. The cabin says yes as many times as you ask it to, which is all a cabin can do. You bank the fire, caution's hand over hope's jaw. You make places for sleep on the floor like men lay plans they intend to betray in the morning. Cade takes a corner, back to the wall, eyes on the door, expression like a man who plans for sentiment and counts for knives. Marlowe lets his coat become a pillow but not a promise. Scar removes his boots as if they might have opinions about where they rest. Jolmare is asleep between blink and breath because some men pay off exhaustion the way others pay off debt, in single. Honest coins. You're almost there, almost allowed to borrow a few seconds of careless, when the night decides you haven't earned it yet. From somewhere near the north corner, where the chinking is newer and the logs older, comes a sound like a finger running along bone. Not Ratu measured, not wind too intentional. May's eyes open. Orin lifts his head. Cade's hand finds the knife he keeps where men keep rosaries. Marlowe sits up without his body admitting it did. Finn looks at you, and in his eyes is the winter's question. What did we bring in with us? Outside, the wolves stop singing. Inside, something scratches the wall again. If you're still holding the line, say, "I don't sleep on cougars" in the comments. We are not, absolutely not, done. Asterisk, everybody holds breath the way different men hold liquor badly. Beautifully, loudly, with conviction. The sound comes once more, a deliberate, slow scrape, then 3 quick taps, like code in a prison. Your first thought is cat the kind that wears silence like a jewel and has paws the size of a skillet. But cats thump different and breathe louder when they think they're quiet. This is calculation wrapped in wood. This is a mind considering you the way you consider a problem you can fix if it doesn't get clever. Cade exhales, as if laying a bet. Wolverine, he whispers, mean as gossip, smells meat through wood, finds the seam where your pride lives. Scar grins without mirth. Shoot through the log, he mutters. Jorma shakes his head. 2 walls, he says. Ricochet. Then we chew lead until morning. Orin reaches for May's sleeve. She rests her palm on his head, thumb moving once in a slow arc, an answer older than words. Jasper leans forward to fast and covers it with a cough that frays like a rope. You catch Finn's eye and tilt your head. Lantern. He moves like water over stones. No scrape, no clink. He lifts the hood and turns the flame low until the cabin is more shadow than light. Your pupils drink it in and leave you with a new room, silhouettes. Edges, truer things. The scratching shifts, left north corner to east, low to high. You kneel by the hearth and put your palm on the floor. Vibrations travel through pine better than through air. You feel it, a curious, powerful little engine testing your mistakes. The meat rack. The bottom board of the pantry where grease and smoke soak like prayer into wood. The chink wedged with moss that dried and shrank. The Wolverine, god of spite and survival, taking notes. May stands up quietly, which is a dangerous miracle. Don't you begin, because the last thing you need is someone between the wall and what's learning it. She shushes. You with a glance that would stop thunder, then moves to the pantry. Her hands disappear into her pack and return with a loop of wire and 2 notched sticks. She sets the sticks, ties the wire, lifts a slab of smoked venison from the rack with a little ceremony, and threads the bait so that one tug will make a joke of any neck in the county. Her fingers are fast, sure, and calm. Marlowe watches and folds an opinion he was about to produce into his pocket for later. Cade grins. You married a trap, he whispers. A woman with one is 2. May finishes glances at you. Open the window, she says. Just enough for smell. Oiled paper is not a window so much as a suggestion of one, but the top edge is pinned with pegs. You pull the 2 on the right, lift an inch, let a ribbon of cold snake in, and curl the cabin's heat into bait. The smell of meat threads the gap like gossip through a church. Generous, mean, the scratching stops. Silence arrives like royalty. Even the fire seems to hold its breath, crackle caught in throat. Then a thud against the outer wall, low. The Wolverine's shoulder testing. A second thud, higher. The world's crankiest locksmith running his key along your seams. Another scrape right over the trap, this time Cade's hand on your shoulder. He'll fight the wire, he breathes. We go fast, or we go sorry. You count with your heart. 1, toother, snare sings. A snarl follows that yanks your bones tight and then shakes them loose. The wire snaps taut with a sound like he'd just married the wrong person. Something heavy hammers the wall. The trap frame bites into the sill. The cabin groans in one offended note. You and Scar hit the door together. Jorma has already thrown the bar. Cold pours in, smoke rolls. The room becomes a battlefield and a barn at the same time. The Wolverine is a low, furious shadow thrashing at the base of the wall. Wire looped behind jaw and around ears, eyes lantern bright with betrayal. It lunges at you and the wire checks it, saving your soft parts from becoming a story your friends would tell with too much laughter and not enough reverence. You plant the pole across the wire, give leverage, and Jorma leans his shoulder in with Icelandic contempt for bad ideas. Knife, you hiss. Scar hands the long one, honed mean. You work fast and cruel the way mercy is sometimes delivered. The Wolverine goes from motion to memory in a second that will stain your sleep and save your winter. Blood steams on snow like a ghost, trying to remember its body. The wolves beyond the line lift their heads, their chorus modulates from question to answer. You close the door. The cabin exhales, then inhales, body recognizing the organ it was missing. May wipes her blade on a rag you give her and nods thanks, not just for help, but for letting her move, not be moved. Orin stares at the door as if a dragon might be leaning against it. Exhausted and dead and still dangerous. Keith's voice unsteady but trying to land in humor. Says, "We could have just handed him Cade." Cade bows from the waist as if tragedy and comedy exists because he remembers to perform them. "I'm stringy," he says. "Too many opinions. Wolverines prefer optimists." Marlowe sits back down, remeasuring the room the way a man does who just met a new factor in his math. May's competence. Your reflex, the pack outside, the thing in the wall that tried to be a ghost and left pelt and problem. He tilts his head toward the shelf where you set the needle packet. "We stitch the snare hole," he says, practical to the marrow. "We double the chinking. We hang the pelt high and the meat higher." "Pelt's ours," Cade says lightly, "by the law of whoever bled the most." May lifts an eyebrow. "We bled quiet," she says. Cade surrenders with a shrug that says, "Joke first, respect after." "Shared," he amends. "I'll take an ear for luck." "Take a lesson for luck," Finn mutters, surprising himself. The room gives him the small sound a tribe gives when a boy says a grown man's sentence. We settle again. The storm outside has curled up like a dog in front of some other man's hearth. The wolves begin to move, not leaving, not closing, just adjusting a circle used to the long game. You hang the Wolverine in the lee of the rafters, hide side out, to cool and shrink and become something you can turn into a hood that laughs at frost. May rolls her shoulders, sits with her back to the log where the draft is least. Orin drifts sideways until his head is almost on Cade's thigh, stops himself, repositions closer to his mother. Cade notices, turns that into a story, quiet and informal, about a river that ran backward once and the fish that swore him to secrecy. Orin's breath evens. You watch Cade's face become the thing he says he isn't, a man responsible. He feels you watching and throws you a look that says he knows what you know and doesn't know what to do with it. Jasper dozes and coughs and wakes and drinks and dozes again. You keep a finger on that cycle like a doctor counting the pulse of a town. Keats scratches a sketch of the Wolverine in the soot on a piece of plank, then blows it off. as if to prove he can choose what stays. When sleep finally comes. It's parceled 2 hours here. 1 there, never enough to make a plan, just enough to deny a mistake. You take last watch with May because she doesn't sleep like other people, and you have questions that don't want a crowd. You said you left because of men, you say. Voice in the seam between crackle and hush. Men, she answers. And what men turn into when they think they own maps. Company. Company, miners, sheriffs who sell law by the pound. She takes a sip of water, face unreadable. A man knelt on my porch and promised a fence would make me safe. Next week, he sold the fence to my neighbor and came back with a deed he said my name wrong. And Cade. She smiles, small, unkind and fond. Cade happened like weather. Blew in, blew out, left a little rain for a garden I didn't know I was planting. He's better than he thinks and worse than he tells you. He doesn't belong to anyone, and that includes himself. You trust him. I trust him to try, she says. I trust you to finish. That last sentence lands like an axe finding the exact seam in a knot. Trust is more dangerous than hunger. It burns slower and leaves less ashdot. Dawn arrives grey and domestic, like a widow with sleeves rolled up. No showy colours, just light enough to see the price tag on everything. The storm has shaved the drifts into shapes that look like ideas. The sky has emptied itself and now wants you to pay it back in labour. Marlowe stands, posture already counting cordwood. We cut, he says. Cade, show the stand. Jalmer, you and Scar on felling. Elias, he looks to you, and the look isn't a command. It's an invitation that knows what you're likely to say. I'll go, you answer. Finn with me on the sled. Jasper on the hearth. May on the door, she says, and the boy on the counting. He can add wood or he can add hours. Both are math. Breakfast is hard and hot and blessedly boring. Corn dodgers fried in bacon grease and dipped in syrup. Keats claims was maple once and now is mostly memory. Coffee enough to make men agreeable to bad ideas. The wolves watch the yard as you harness 2 of Cade's horses. The horses watch the wolves like they know the treaties and disagree with the terms. The stand is exactly where Cade said. A ragged circle on the south rise, where lightning turned a pine congregation into a cathedral of dry timber. You work with the rhythm of men who know that rhythm is safer than speed. Notch, saw, worn, step, thud, limb, buck, stack. The air bites without malice. Breath smokes like your body is telling the cold secrets. Sweat feels expensive and correct. Cade cuts like a man paying off a different debt. He talks as he works, not to waste breath, but to pace it. Met a ute hunter last spring, he says, between pulls. Taught me how to read wind on bark. Said the mountain talks loudest to the ones who shut up first. Jalmer nods. In my country, we say the tree tells you how it wants to fall, he says. If you disagree, it tells your head something else. Scar grunts approval that contains a history of taught lessons he survived by a margin so thin it still whistles. You load the sled until it looks like a dare. Finn loops lashings with a competence that would make a riverboat man nod. He glances back toward the cabin every other minute like a boy who finally loves something enough to worry about it. By midday, the yard is a forest in stacks. Jasper tends the fire with a priest's care and a gambler's eye. May has turned the snared seam into a strength. Driving a second peg through and tarring the inside with pitch and tallow, until the wall smells like a shipyard. Oren counts each armload in 10s and 50s, then in stories. This stack is nights. This pile is snow days. This row is if someone gets sick. He is inventing the language of safety in a place that doesn't speak it often. At first squint of proper light, you see them, figures on the far tree line, small and exact. 5, no. 7, silent, still, patient as weather. Blackfoot, with bows unstrung but close, guns slung but not sleeping. They watch your yard the way you watched the avalanche, with respect that has room left for anger. Marlowe sees them too. He sets his saw down, owns the moment with posture. This is the talk, he says. Cade wipes his hands on his trousers. Want me? He asks. I want you not to lie. May says. Cade considers the hardest job a man like him can do. He nods. You walk out past the edge of your own prints. You leave your rifle at the porch and bring your hat and a strip of smoked meat held open in both hands. You hold your breath the way you did last night, badly and beautifully. The wolves fan left, laying themselves like punctuation marks in a sentence your body's about to say. The 7 step forward. The lead man's hair is bound with red cloth and winter, his eyes the color of burned wood. He stops 10 paces out near, but not so near. His gaze touches each of your faces like fingers that didn't have to ask permission. He speaks first in his language rich, rivered, the kind that makes English sound like a broom. Marlowe answers in a trade jargon that pretends to be a bridge. The man listens, not insulted, not impressed. He points at the yard, the wood, the meat, the woman behind your door. The boy trying very hard not to stare and failing. The company men who will leave in spring and take with them stories that turn other men into winter. His hand comes back to you. He says a single word that even your poor ear knows. Debt. You nod once. Yes, you say, in the only language you both own equally, honesty. You move the meat forward and set it on the snow between you. Then you step back 2 paces and spread your hands, empty, but not powerless. The man looks at the meat, then at the wolves, then at you. He says another word. Cade, to your right, translates slow. Listen, so you do. You listen to the wind, to the creek seated at the edge of your land, pretending patience, to the wolves tapping something invisible into place, to Finn's lungs, to Jasper's cough finding its smaller self, to May's hand on the doorframe, steady, to Oren counting under his breath without numbers, and to the chief for whatever word we earned for him as he begins to tell you winters, law in his tongue, and demands you answer in yours. If you're here for it, drop I pay my winters in the comments. Want parts 7 and 8 next. I'll roll them out in full. Asterisk he speaks, and you listen. Not just the sense of it though. Cade's quiet. Careful translation tags along behind, like a younger brother trying to keep up, but the rhythm. A language that grew up watching rivers prove points and winter enforce them. The elder, his hair braided with red cloth that's seen more seasons than most towns, doesn't give you history as an alibi. He gives you rules the way mountains give you weather, not negotiable, only survivable. Cade murmurs in your ear, English stepping in where your understanding trips. He says, your men fired first in the valley 2 suns ago. One of his sons bled into spruce roots. He says, snow carried the blood to the creek. He says, the creek tells all houses what they owe. Asterisk. Marlowe's mouth tightens. You feel the room of the yard tilt. 7 men watching, wolves fanned left with their yellow patience. Finn on the stoop holding silence like a bowl so it doesn't spill. May's hand flat on the doorframe, palm steady, eyes on the elder, body measuring wind. You step forward the width of an apology and let your voice be small. We owe, you say. Not the company, not the season. We, it matters. And the elder's face shows a micro-weather, changeless wind. More contour. Cade follows with the trade tongue. He says they owe. The elder nods once and speaks again, a list now, with cadence. Cade keeps up, 2 things for blood. First, meat that lives when the cold doesn't. Elk or moose, fat still in it. Second, wood, big wood, enough to warm sorrow. He says wood is time, and time is how you pay the dead. Marlowe's jaw works. A thought loosens, and he lets it go. We'll cut, he says. We'll haul. We'll smoke what we can and send it when the sun eats the edge off the snow. 3 days. Scar grunts. A sound that means hard but honest. HJALMAR. Nods as if the numbers are already in his arms. You add the 3rd thing before the elder does. And talk, you say. At the bend where the cottonwoods lean, your voice places a flag in ground that could be a grave. Will come. Men with mouths instead of rifles. We'll bring the boy you tip your chin at Orin to prove we remember what a future looks like. Cade translates. The elder's eyes go to Orin, who stares back with a courage that isn't brave so much as to new to be anything else. The elder says a short phrase. Cade smiles without humor. He says, children keep men honest. The wolves move, a half step, adjusting the geometry. Silver's gaze tracks each face like he's reading a ledger for errors. The elder glances at him too, just briefly, as if acknowledging the mountains of the parliament. Debt paid, the elder says, finally or. Cade makes that shape out of the sounds. If promises walk when the snow does, his hand flicks toward the creek. A dismissal or a blessing, you're not sure. He lifts 2 fingers, but one more rule. The company man who fired the first shot doesn't walk this bend. Again, Marlowe says nothing for a long breath. Then he nods with the seriousness of a man signing the bottom of a confession. He won't, he answers. Cade adds a detail that makes the elder's eyes crease. He says, the one who did it is gone. Cade translates. The mountain finds the guilty too. That is almost true. The avalanche's tale took Collins and Miller. Men the mountains didn't particularly ask for, but collected anyway. Whether the shot belonged to one of them or one of the others fleeing down valley. Winter's math closes the column in red ink all the same. The elder understands. His eyebrow lifts the smallest degree. Like the world got its own grim justice without him having to push. The eldest of the 7 steps forward, another pace. He is close enough now that you can see a pale scar tugging his lip when he speaks the story of some past negotiation that didn't hear the weather. He extends his palm. It is empty. A dangerous generosity. You take it. Warm skin meeting yours, not as an oath, but as a temperature. It is the oldest currency people trust when they can't trust anything else. The wind bites your knuckles. His fingers close once, firm, and release. You step back, feeling that some invisible door just opened in a wall you had assumed was low-bearing. He turns his head. The 6 behind him pivot as one and slide away through the boles, shadows that learned to wear men for winter. Silver watches them go until the last ribbon of red cloth vanishes, then looks back at you as if to ask, will your mouth keep up with your feet? 3 days, Marlowe says, already looking at the stack, the sleds, the slope that will be a sermon for shoulders. Cade, show us the second stand you didn't brag about. Jorma, you're on wedge and call. Scar, you lash. Finn, he stops, recalibrates, and assigns the boy the kind of job he'll remember without hating. You watch the stove and the door. If our breath burns, yours shouldn't. Count the wood and the hours. That's leadership, not laziness. Finn nods, chin high. For a second, the boy looks exactly like a man you'd follow into a sentence. Work becomes a metronome. The stand Cade held back is a gift to men who pay their dues in rings. A host of deadfall tucked under a basalt lip where wind didn't steal its dryness. The saws sing the paired draw of two men who've learned each other's anger and each other's amends. Chips fly in petals. The air smells like a carpenter's memory. Each thud is a punctuation mark the mountain grants you for speaking in labor. You stack until stacks become walls. You lash until rawhide leaves tattoos on your gloves. You drag sleigh loads that make the horses flatten ears and accept that living past March is a team sport. May turns pitch and ash and fat into a paste that will keep chinking tight as a stitched wound. Orin counts, then recites, then sings quietly numbers he learned from cold. 24, sleep. 34 stories. 54 if the river lies. Jasper rests. Fights, rests again. And the cough that wanted to colonize his chest becomes a border skirmish instead of war. Keats writes the numbers on a plank with charcoal and then writes beside them a single word. Bridge. Not for the creek, though you'll need one. When the ice goes soft, but for this gap you're trying to cross without becoming part of the bottom. Night brings its usual audit. You bank the fire and catch May's eyes across it. There is a conversation in them that would take all winter, about what men do to one another when winter isn't forcing them to be honest, about what it costs to keep from becoming the thing that cost you. Orin sleeps with his hand tucked under his cheek like he learned it from a book about cities. Cade lies on his back, staring at the rafters like he can read weather in the knife handles and knots. Afternoon of the second day. Trouble comes dressed as spring. Warm wind and the sound of water finding arteries. The creek rises a hand's width, then another. The edge turns grey in a way that makes you distrust your own feet. Keats tests a pole, and the pole tests back and loses 2 inches in the argument. We promised 3, Marlowe says, watching the cut line of water creep up the bank like a rumour. We deliver in 2. Nighthall, Jorma agrees. Not because he likes night, but because night likes men who move when the mountain says move, so you haul under a sky with a bruise on it. The moon puts a thumbprint on the drift. The wolves escort you like ushers. You stack wood at the bend where the cottonwoods lean. Not right on the bank that would be stupid even by company standards, but on a low terrace. Orin calls the porch. You leave wrapped venison, white fat, still marbling the red like summer remembered. You drive a split stake into the loam and bind a strip of bright kerchief to Cade's contribution and a concession that humans like signs, even when the river already wrote. 1. Just before dawn. A figure glides out of the dark. Not a ghost, not a friendly, not a fool. The elder's second, the one with crow feathers bound. Into his hair pauses at the edge of your light and gives you a nod that is not gratitude and not warning. It's acknowledgement, which is all winter ever grants to those who refuse to die. 2 days, he says in his tongue. Cade grins without teeth. He says, "You're greedy," Cade translates, which is how praise sounds when the snow hasn't decided whether to forgive you. You sleep for an hour and wake into a wind that smells like thaw and trouble. The creek hisses. The snowpack above groans in a tone that tells truth as if it's tired of repeating itself. You walk out to the bend, look at the stakes, and feel a thought slot into place. The river will come out of its clothes today. When it does, anything low and lazy will become part of the next county. You start to say it when the mountain says it for you. A crack reports up valley like a rifle too big for men. The ice plate in the narrows lets go of its decades-old plan to hold and bolts, shattering into panes that tumble, flip and body slam the water beneath until the water becomes a different animal. The creek rises a foot in a breath, then another. The cottonwoods sway like men at a wake. Inside, you shout, and the word isn't fear. It's math. Marlowe shoves the last sled uphill with Scar and Jorma managing the line. The horses throw their weight like gambles that paid off. You skid back into the yard on foam and gratitude. The river hits your old bank, thinks about it, reconsiders, and choose a new path a horse length closer to your door. The wolves retreat to the ridge and sit like critics who approve of strong choices. Silver looks at you and you say out loud, "Not today," because sometimes a spell needs a voice. The water rips past now, throwing up chunks of white that break into ivory, that break into knives. The meat at the porch is safe by a foot you earned. The wood holds because you overlashed like a man who's learned this lesson too many times and not often enough. And then you see something the exact size of what you're afraid of. A man-shaped thing shooting the bend, arms up, mouth open, eyes crowded with everything but hope. He ricochets off an ice pan, catches the branch of a cottonwood that refuses to be tree and becomes grip, then loses it because fingers were never invented for this much cold. You're moving before your thoughts take attendance. Rope, sled, pole, Marlowe's bark, don't you? But he's already behind you, swearing and clipping the line to your belt. Because leadership is mostly yelling at men for thinking like you and then helping them do it. You run into the creek until the creek tries to convince your bones they belong to someone else. The cold is not weather now. It's a law. The rope holds around your waist like a promise and a threat. The man's fingers find your pole, slip, find again, jam. You lean back, let the water try to walk you like a bad dog. And you and Marlowe and Scar and Jorma and the ghosts of every man who first put a line on a full pull like you invented that. 2. He comes in hard against the shelf, hits your shins, hollers, then goes soft as a confession. You haul him over the torn ice lip and the river screams past with contempt. He coughs up water, river weeds, and a story you'll decode later. May wraps him in blankets before his teeth think to chatter. Finn pushes the door wide like he can make the cabin bigger with will. Keats throws another log on the fire and does not look at the wood ledger because sometimes mercy is not an expense. It's the only income you're going to see all week. The man is Ute, not from the elders band different braids, different bead pattern at the collar. He blinks up at you with the bewildered gratitude of a fish held too long in a man's hand and recognizes. Cade with a half smile that says, "You were right that day by the salt lick." Cade answers in a stream of sounds that feel like water and ash. The man says a name. Kanash, your spine remembers a campfire from last year. A hunter who measured you with his knuckles and said without moving his face, Wolves chose you. He looks at Silver through the open door and nods as if a letter just arrived on time. You set a pot for broth and let your hands do the ordinary church work that keeps extraordinary days from becoming funerals. Heat, salt, spoon, blanket, change the wet for the dry. Check the fingers, check the eyes, prove to a body that it's still a place worth living in. The river lowers half a handspan by afternoon, exhausted from shouting. The porch remains. The stake with the red kerchief remains, bright and ridiculous and right by nightfall. The rescued man's color returns to something blood recognizes. He grips your wrist once. Not thanks, covenant. Cade translates the loose rope words. He says, spring moves camps. He says, they saw your piles and thought, either you are fools or you are men who wish to live with us and not around us. He says, now they think maybe both. Cade grins. I told him the part where we are fools is the part that keeps us interesting. You sleep like a man who spent his luck and got change back anyway. When morning finds your eyes, it does it with gold, sun on new water, steam lifting off the river like spirits, deciding they can finally go warm wherever it is they go. Promises remain. Men remain. The mountain, indifferent, remains. You stand on the stoop with coffee that tastes like someone cared and watch Silver watch you. He blinks slow, approving the way you didn't die today. If you're with me, write wood is time in the comments. Because out here, that's the kind of currency you don't counterfeit. Asterisk, when men say spring, they mean mercy. When mountains say spring, they mean work. The ice is gone now. In its place, a road made of troubles that don't like shoes. Mud takes a man's boot and keeps it like a story it'll tell later. The slope above the cabin sheds small avalanches of rotten snow you greet with the respect you reserve for drunk uncles. Don't turn your back. Don't take their jokes personally. Keep the exits in mind. Marlowe declares the wood ledger righteous and the meat ledger respectable. We've paid, he says. If the math is honest and the river doesn't edit it, he eyes the door, the world beyond it suddenly open enough to let whatever you invite. Cade leans his chair on two legs like he's flirting with gravity. We should go look at the trapline, he says. The beaver didn't sign our treaty. He inclines his chin at Finn, and the boy deserves to learn what a promise looks like when you tie it to a stake and come back to see if it complained. You plan the day with one of those frontier chalkboards, the side of a flower. Crate, route, task, risk. You write under RISK. Everything. Finn laughs, then sees your face and stops. He takes up the piece of charcoal and writes below it, smaller, everyone. You nod. The lesson got in bay stays to put the cabin back into spring shape hides turned. Lines reset, seems tarred. The small domestic wars no one sings about, but everyone bleeds for. Orin shadows her, learning to read the world in chores. Jasper insists on walking the flat for a quarter mile with Keats, rebuilding his lungs into something that doesn't betray him when conversation climbs. You and Cade and Finn shoulder the packs and follow the creek upstream where the old dam sits like a question you haven't answered because winter kept interrupting. The willow has catcons again. The air tastes like something thawed and got honest about it. The wolves don't follow, not exactly, but they appear in parallel. Like the sentence has punctuation whether you put it in or not. The first set you check holds a story you wanted. A big winter beaver. Fur thick as a city man's lies. Fat still sweet for a few days, until the river tells it to travel. Finn watches the way you speak to the animal you're about to skin. Not a prayer, not an apology, but a statement of work. You show him where to cut to keep the hide whole. He leans in as if the line of the knife is writing something only he will ever read. Why do we take them? He asks, not accusation, curiosity that grew up with hunger and refuses to be stupid, because everything eats, you say. Because winter lets you live if you learn to share the cost. Because if I don't, then the man with a factory map will. Because I would rather make a bargain with the river than a promise with a ledger. Cade adds. Because Cade believes in adding, and because a decent hat keeps your ideas where you left them. Finn smiles, then falters, then looks downriver, where a man might be coming with paperwork. He's learning that laws have borders and winters don't. 2 traps down, the river speaks with a new accent, muffled, fast, the tone of an argument happening behind a door. Silver appears in the trees without warning and stares at you with that look that says, stand still long enough to hear the bad thing before it gets its boots on. You do. The earth under your left foot is hollow. The bank ahead is undercut and pretending not to be. The air is cool in that way that means it just came out of a hole older than your notions. Cade points with his lips moccasin language. Dens, he whispers. Coyote? Or worse, a cat's second room. Finn's fingers hover above the trigger of fear and don't pull. You touch his wrist and put his hand on the tree trunk. Feel this, not that. His breath evens. The lesson here is not about animals. It's about the difference between moving smart and moving fast. You skirt the undercut, giving it the dignity of a wide berth. 100 yards farther on, something else has made a decision. A chunk of cornice lets go upslope, a white paragraph stepping down the page in clumsy, loud sentences. It isn't big enough to kill, just big enough to teach. Snow pours over old road, buries your earlier tracks, builds a knee-high wall with a grin you recognize. Gotcha. Finn watches it, and you watch him. He doesn't flinch, doesn't grin back either. He files it in the drawer. Labeled, "The mountain has a sense of humor, and it's very dry." Good, at noon, you take coffee from a fire that barely admits it exists. Cade tells a story that is obviously a lie and exactly the truth. About a night on the sweet water when the wind taught him to play a tune on a bottle, and the bottle taught him what loneliness is for. Finn snorts, then listens. Men who make it out here learn to pick the useful out of the pretty. You bring the pelts home and the cabin, changes shape around the weight of them. May grins a rare private grin when she sees the quality and the care. Orin touches the fur like it might bite and then decides that would be fair. Jasper laughs, just a little, and doesn't cough after, which feels like the first day of a life the doctor might have approved of. Evening finds you on the stoop with Marlowe. He holds a ledger and a pipe and looks like a painting titled soon. He points with the pipe stem toward the west, where a smear of town lives in a notion. When the pass is open, he says, men will come through with talk. Some will be mine. Some will be yours. Some will be the kind who think law means making other people recite it. What do you want me to tell them about this bend? You sip coffee gone thick as philosophy. The wolves ghost in the corner of your eyes and become trees when you look at them. Silver is absent, which means he's working. Tell them we talk here before we trade, you say. Tell them the porch is for gifts and grief, not gun muzzles. Tell them a woman and a boy live here who owe nobody money and everybody the truth. Tell them if they shoot first, the river will remember, and so will I. Marlowe nods. He isn't built to be your friend. He is built to tally. But something in him appreciates a clean column. I'll say it, he answers. I won't swear they'll hear it. He taps ash into a tin. You going to stay? That question has been tapping at your ribs like a trapped bird. It wears all the faces. The valley silver showed you up norther, stream sowing diamonds through grass. A larger cabin with a door that doesn't stick. A smokehouse that doesn't lean. A garden that knows your name. A roof you don't have to apologize to in March. It also wears the face of leaving, the way men leave quick, with notes that don't explain enough, with debts that go bad in other people's hands. I'm going to move, you say finally, but not out, up, to a valley that doesn't flood just because winter got bored. I'll split time with this bend until the treaty grows roots. Marlowe grunts approval that sounds like a doorframe settling after the last nail. You'll need planks, he says. You'll need men who can move a wall without it becoming a pile. You'll need luck, and you'll try to pretend you didn't. Cade will claim all the luck anyway. You answer, as if his name is a prayer he can't resist being the answer to. Cade steps out of the shadow with that smile that stops just short of confession. Did someone order a terrible plan? He asks. Because I brought a map. I drew from the back of a horse. He unrolls a rawhide with scratches that might be heresy in a town and our gospel here. Game trails that shortcut misery. A dry shelf that will keep your new cabin's sill from sucking rot. A spring that tastes like metal in summer and like God in August. He taps a crosshatch to ridges over. Be trees, he says. Wait till June. You can trade honey for the kind of loyalty whiskey fakes. May joins you. Arms folded, the soft not softening. You're moving, she says, not asking. Yes, she scans the tree line. Her voice turns careful. We're going south, she says. To the fort. To a winter that wears plank fences and church bells. I'll trade hides for a school and try not to spit at the wrong man. Orin will learn numbers that don't come only from wood and weather. Orin stands in the door, listening, absorbing, trying not to bend under a decision that will make him into 3 different people before he's done being boy. You feel your heart do that double beat that means pride and grief arrived holding hands again. You know the way. You ask. Cade's smile dims into something noble and stupid. I do, he says, and I'll go with, because I am not a good man, but I am a man who prefers. A boy do his growing someplace that doesn't. Think graves are a schoolroom. You want to argue that the mountains can teach a boy how to carry his own soul, but you look at May's profile and see the ledger she keeps. You have your treaty. She has hers. You nod. We'll ride to the divide together, you say. Then the maps change languages. The next week becomes a braid of leaving and arriving. You haul your first load to the North Valley with Jorma and Scar and a promise of debt repaid in sweat. The trail Cade marked rides easy across the ribs of the hills. Twice you stop because ease is suspicious. The valley opens again like a book you didn't realize had a second half. You choose a knoll above the floodplain, drive a stake where the front door will admit morning, and stand a long time with your palms on your hips, imagining walls where there is only air. Silver steps into the open meadow like he owns the deed and inspects your choice. He sits, yawns, looks at the stream, looks at you, looks at the line of sky where storms are born. and sneezes like a foreman pleased the apprentice picked the good lot. You return to the cabin by the creek to find Marlowe notating a different future. The company men have built a cache with roof bark that doesn't leak. They've cut and stacked on the far edge of the porch to keep your promises a foot above spite. Jasper has decided to live and acts like it eats more, carries more, coughs less. Keats has a sketch of the Blackfoot elder's face that is respectful enough to be dangerous. Finn has learned the difference between brave and loud, and it shows in the way he holds the axe not like a hero, like a tool. The day before May and Orrin head south, the Blackfoot elders return to pick up what the porch saved for them. The river has lowered to sensible. The air holds witness. May steps out with Orrin beside her. She keeps one hand on the boy's shoulder as if introducing him to a judge. The elder looks at the boy and then at the woman and nods, once acknowledging the kind of courage that doesn't carry a gun but makes a road anyway. He speaks to Orrin, a handful of syllables polished by use. Cade translates with unusual accuracy. He says, "Remember the mountains when men talk too much." Orrin nods, eyes big and bright, like a lamp trimmed properly. Then the elder turns to you. He raises his chin toward the north, the valley you haven't yet built and already live in. He says a phrase that makes Cade grin like a man who loves language because it lets him pretend he's the author of things. He says, "Wolves told him you're choosing a better fight." He extends his palm again, warm again. This time you put both hands around his and hold. He returns the second hand, thumbs pressing the back of yours, an old world seal on a new world contract. Marlowe sets a small bundle at the edge of the porch. Coffee, needles, a tin of gun screws that will fit too many rifles to be an accident. He clears his throat, embarrassed by generosity. "For the road you don't need," he says, "but might be grateful for." The elder takes the bundle and nods not in thanks, in understanding the limits and uses of trade. When they go, the yard feels larger and smaller at once, as if a piece of the map just got printed and another got smudged. That night, you sit with Cade on the stoop and trade silences. He takes a pull from a bottle that has somehow never learned to be empty. "You sure?" he asks eventually, eyes on the slice of north that keeps trying to spell your name in cloud. "I'm tired of fighting the wrong parts of this place," you answer. "I want to build something the weather approves of." Cade nods. "Approval is overrated," he says. Then he shrugs. "But a roof that doesn't leak is not." He stares into the dark a moment longer, the night writing its slow sentences around his outline. "I'll take them south," he says quietly. "I'll walk them to a gate with a bell on it and leave a piece of me there so the boy can borrow it when arithmetic gets mean. Then I'll come back up the wrong trail with a story about a mule that knew Latin and a woman who swore I invented roads." He tilts his head. "Don't die while I'm gone. I'm greedy with my friends. I don't lend them to the mountain. I'll pay my winters," you say. He grins. "That's a tattoo and a sermon." Morning comes fast, like a letter slid under your door by a hand that doesn't apologize. The horses stamp and breathe smoke. May saddles like she's done it both in daylight and while the devil held the lantern. Orrin climbs up behind Cade with the kind of solemn he thinks makes him older and does. May looks at you like she's using your face to memorize the weather for later. "Don't make this place a grave," she says. "Make it a town nobody writes down." "I'll try," you answer. She laughs once. "Don't try. Do it or don't. Trying is for men who want credit instead of roofs. You tip your hat to that sermon. She tips hers to yours. Cade salutes Jorma and Scar like they are ships he hopes to see again. Kisses the air an inch from Jasper's temple. Steals Keats's charcoal and draws an obscene moustache on the corner of a crate. Ruffles Finn's hair and turns it into gravity that will hold when Cade isn't here too. Then he swings up, puts 2 fingers to his brow in a hello disguised as goodbye, and turns south. You watch them until the bend takes them. You watch longer at the place you last saw them, because that's what eyes do when they love and hate a departure and can't tell which is which. Then you turn to the north and put your hand on the sled handle like it's a promise you can push. Silver steps out of the underbrush, crosses the yard, stops 3 paces off, and sneezes again. You laugh. It is a sound with more room in it than any you've made since September. You look at Finn, he looks at you. You both look up Val, where a door in the air is waiting for you too. Decide whether you'll be the man who builds or the man who goes back into town to be told what roofs are supposed to mean. Let's load the ridge, you say. Finn grabs the other handle if you're still in the sled with us. Drop I build where weather nods in the comments. Parts 9 and 10 are next. Raising the new cabin, a visit from someone you didn't invite, and the summer that tries to teach you all the ways comfort can be a trap. Asterisk. Here's a truth you don't hear in town. A cabin is just a confession in wood about what you think winter might do to you. The first blow you strike at dawn is not against a Triaxis, against the temptation to build wrong because your arms are tired and your hope is loud. Day 1 in the North Valley, you pick your line like a surgeon choosing a scar. You stake corners beneath the sky rinsed clean by night. The knoll lifts you a horse's height above the floodplain. The creek slides through with the quiet of an animal that ate well. Grass already plays the wind in shy chords. Your door will face east for mercy, south for light, north for warnings, west for Stormsby, 'cause a good home is always listening in 4 directions. Scar and Jormare haul timbers with that twin gravity of men who don't need to talk to agree. Finn is the runner, the fetcher, the boy who will someday tell the story and needs right now to learn how to lift a log without lifting his pride. Marlowe lends to teamsters and a pair of draft bays he swears at, but keeps like saints. Keats marks cut lengths with charcoal, the numerals long and elegant like they learned manners in Philadelphia, then came west to see if they could still behave with mud on their shoes. You fell standing dead first on the wood that spent years listening to weather and is ready to speak roof. Cade taught you this before he left. Green logs warp like lies. Old logs tell the truth even when it costs them. Scar wedges. Julmer calls cadence. The saw sings an old hymn, the kind with a refrain that sounds like 2 men believing in each other because they have to. Asterisk. When the first sill log settles in its trench, the ground says yes in a way your bones can hear. You chock, you level, you sight down the line until the world stops pretending it's straight and actually is. A cabin is not a box. It's a series of agreements between lengths of stubborn. Every corner notch you cut is a handshake you'll need in February. By mid-morning, you're shaving chips, ribbon-thin scribe, score, pop. Clean until 2 logs, kiss and hold like cousins who grew up next door. Finn watches the way your knife makes a truth the saw can't. You hand him the draw knife and show him how to pull with his back, not his worry. The steel whispers, his shoulders find a new way to be useful, and the log accepts him into its biography. Silver appears at the edge of the meadow and sits. Supervises, really. It would be ridiculous if it weren't exactly right. He watches how you place the long silther one against wind, the way a friend watches you choose a road. When you set it and step back, the wolf's ears flick once as if to say, "Good, don't get proud about it." Marlowe arrives midday with a barrel and jokes about christening ships. It's nails, not whiskey, and everyone cheers louder for it than they would for anything that burns. He drops a smaller parcel in your pomegranate bits, scavenged from a wagon that didn't believe in mountains hard enough. "For the pegs," he says, as if generosity embarrasses him. "Don't waste them on pretty. You won't. You bore clean. You drive oak pins that won't apologize when the logs shrink and try to make distance. Jasper stronger now. Lungs negotiating better terms. Planes are flat along the inside faces for a ledge that will later accept shelves and stories." He hums off-key and right-hearted. Every pass of the blade leaves a curl that smells like a carpenter's father. Roof math comes next. You kneel in grass and draw triangles with a stick, the sun making your shadows into drafts. Pitch steeper than a preacher's warning. Snow should slide and not sit. Julmer nods, tracing with his thumb the angle that will allow storms to go elsewhere. You set the ridgepole in a ceremony without words. 4 men, 1 rope, 2 breaths held, a count, a lift. The pole rises, the meadow hushes, silver stands. There is a moment longer than a blink, shorter than a prayer where the world accepts your plan. Keats drops shingles from split, spruce like he's dealing cards in a saloon where the stakes are winter and the pot is life. Finn climbs too high and you bark without thinking. He grins sheepish and adjusts because today is not the day to audition for legend. Scar nails with the cadence of a drumline. You smell pitch, son. The ghost of last year's rain trapped in wood that's finally becoming future tense. Evening lays itself down in the grass. You stand in the framed doorway looking into an empty room, and it looks back like a promise with space for arguments. The creek tells silver jokes. Finn drinks with his hat and comes back shivering, saying the water bit him. You tell him that's how you know it's honest. He says that's a terrible way to be honest, and you say that's also how the mountains do it. Day 2 brings walls that finally remember they are walls. You chink between courses with moss, clay, her anything that knows how to occupy a gap like it was born for it. May showed you her recipe. You add pine pitch in the ratios, she whispered, and swear when it sticks where it shouldn't. Orin isn't here to laugh at you. The absence ripples like heat over sage. It hurts the kind of hurt you don't rub because you want it as proof. Midday. The Blackfoot Elder's second ghost walks the meadow with 2 men, each pulling a hand sled piled with peeled poles. He nods at your line, assesses the door orientation without comment, then gestures at the poles. Cade must have told him your roof plan. These are rafters from a stand you couldn't find without a map only a winter-born eye reads. He says 5 words. Cade isn't here to translate, but you understand anyway. We like neighbors who pay. You give tobacco from your private tin you, swore you. Wouldn't share until your house was a house. His mouth tips half a degree. The 3 of them set poles with you in a choreography so clean you're jealous of it. When they go, you realize the cabin smells like treaty. That night, the stars hang low, as if they're thinking about listening. Silver comes close enough that you can hear him breathe, a sound like bellows, slow-walked. He looks at the doorframe. You say aloud, "Yes, I'll build the latch from horn, not iron." Iron freezes fingers. Horn gives, even when it's mad. He blinks. You imagine it's approval and tell yourself imagining isn't always a sin. Day 3 is floor day, and floors are where cabins quietly confess whether they were built from hope or from plans. You lay sleepers on stone piers that will shrug off rodents and flood gossip. The planks you tongue and groove like it's a love story that has to fit. Through winters without splinters in the conversations. Finn slides across a finished patch in socked feet, laughing, then apologizes to the plank as if he's worried it might remember. Marlowe, who has the soul of a ledger and the hands of a muleteer, helps set the firebox stones. He doesn't pretend to be a mason. He respects the craft too much, but he can hold, fetch, test, tap. Jasper places the linterlock that will burn long after you're dead if you build right-hand. Whispers a little private benediction he learned from a mother who believed in recipes and rain.hjlmar. Builds the door like he means it. 2 wide boards, cross-battened iron strap hinges. He traded a blanket and an insult for 2 summers ago. You fit the door, shave the jamb until the swing is a polite guest and the close is a promisand, then you hang. Maize braided buckskin weather strip because you honor women you can still hear when they're a ridge. Away, on the 4th morning, you carry the first things that are yours and not anyone else's into the new room. A tin mug with a dent in the lip that your mouth knows like a friend. A book with half the pages missing and the other half memorized. A bundle of dried sage you didn't pick because you were greedy. Picked it because you needed a memory that burned nice. You set them where the sink of the window will hold them like a hand. Finn brings in a small carving. The wolf you whittled during a blizzard when breath felt like glass. He sets it on the sill and says, so he knows he's invited. Silver, outside, sneezes to prove he already knew. You hear hooves late afternoon. A rider you did not invite and would never turn away, Cade. Dust-chalked, grinning the way a man grins when he comes back from making a shadow into road. He swings down, touches the doorframe, and looks like he might lie about something just to see if the cabin could be improved by it. Southwood delivery complete, he says. Boy commenced to school. Woman commenced to scaring the brass off men who think letters are louder than stares. Trouble. You ask, he shakes his head. Only civilized trouble. Fences and hats and the kind of rules you can ignore if the right person has a birthday. They'll do fine. He slides his glance at the ridgepole. You done better than fine. You feed him stew that tastes like you respect garlic. He tells you about a chaplain who swore in 5 languages and a lieutenant who apologized in 1 and meant it. And the way Orin looked at a slate, the way you look at a sky, measuring angles to see if it will hold. Night settles in close, the new roof ticking as pitch cools. Cade leans back on 2 legs of a chair like he's trying to shake out a story. There's a rider behind me, he says finally. A day, maybe 2. Didn't catch his name, but caught his coat. Government cloth. Surveyor's kit. Eyes like a man who loves a straight line more than a true one. Marlowe stiffens. Keats looks up with the expression of a man who can draw a law but can't make it sit. Finn's face does that new thing he learned this winter. It gets quiet instead of big. You feel heat climb your neck that isn't the stove. Cade lights the map you drew with his finger. He asked about a family wintering I said there weren't families up here, just fools and saints and men who got lost and liked it. He asked about a bend with a porch and a treaty and a wolf that sneezes. I said, sneezing is common in spring. Why is he coming? Finn asks, Because men like him don't believe in what the river remembers, Cade says gently. They believe in what a paper says and who gets to hold it. You stand in the doorway between warm and night, eyes on the dark shapes that make your valley into a sentence you can read without speaking. You built a roof where weather nods. You honored a porch where grief and gifts are laid in the proper order. You paid in wood and meat and work. Still, the world grows, men like thistles, sharp where no one asked them to be. Let him come, you say. We'll pour coffee. We'll say our words. We'll point at the river and the cottonwoods and the porch and the wolf. If that doesn't work, we'll point at the men. Silver, out past the reach of firelight, shifts his weight. It sounds like the page of a hard book turning. If you're building with us, drop a cabin as a confession in the comments. Because roofs aren't just shingles, they're arguments with the sky you intend to win. Asterisk. He arrives in that hour the meadow forgets whether it's morning or evening. Slow light. A wind under the grass. Clouds considering their appointments. He rides a bay that looks like it would rather be a rock. His coat is government blue-grey with where papers rub. His hat is a compromise between sun and pride. Behind him rolls a skinny two-wheeled cart with a tripod, a chain, a brass plate that will shine when it wants to be obeyed, and a box that smells like ink and ambition. Survey, he says, sliding down without asking if the ground minds. Not a question, a profession. Coffee, you answer, because one civil word meets another, and the rest you can negotiate after. Marlowe pours the good pot, the one that doesn't taste like nails. Cade leans on the doorframe, smiling like a curse he hasn't used yet. Finn stands with a board in his hands, the one he was. Sanding suddenly aware he's holding something that could be considered a club or a future shelf, and both are. Accurate, the stranger's face is all planes and cautions. His eyes count quickly. Ridge, creek, roof pitch, door orientation. Wood stack, height, respect, meat rack, discipline. Wolves at the edge, complication. Men in the yard, inventory. Treaty in the air, inconvenient. He tips his head toward the north. New build, he says. Permit. Cade's teeth flash. We ask the wind, he says. It nodded. The surveyor's mouth makes a shape that might one day aspire to smile if given proper support and a team of engineers. He pats the cart. Congressional township grid, he says like a prayer to a god that loves rectangles. Range this, section that. The law made a blanket. Our job is to spread it. The land already has a quilt, Marlowe says. Water and wind and the places where arrows fly straighter. We're just trying not to sleep naked. The man looks at Marlowe and recalibrates the sort of conversation he's entered. I'm told there's a community here, he says, of various arrangements. His eyes flick toward the cottonwoods, then to Silver, who stands as if someone just said his full baptismal name. We have a porch, you answer. We have a treaty. We have a winter we paid for. You nod at the river. It can vouch. He opens the brass box like a preacher unveiling a relic and lifts out a transit, all gleam and intent. He points it at the ridge, spins a wheel, squints one eye, writes down a number that is trying very hard to be true. I'm here to mark a line, he says, and to tell you that where that line goes, certain privileges follow and certain rights don't. Cade whistles low. He brought a leash. Who sent you? Marlowe asks, because it's easier to argue with a name than a coat. District Land Office, the surveyor says. But before you pin me to a wall you haven't built, know this. I've slept cold in snow you would call a liar. I've eaten beef that wasn't a cow. I've taken my hat off when the wind said, or else. I'm not here to burn your porch. I'm here to put it on a map that men in cities can't ignore without lying to themselves so hard they forget how to pay. You have not been expecting that. He watches the surprise travel your face and doesn't smirk. Points for him. So what's the fight? Cade asks lightly. The surveyor sets the tripod in soil no court has named and looks through again. Fight is that paper hates curves, he says softly, and rivers are nothing but. He walks the bend. He kneels by the stake with the red kerchief and touches it like a man who knows why red matters when the snow's high. He sees where the flood chewed. He paces the porch's distance to the new bank. He looks at the cabin the way a carpenter looks at a man's hands, to see if they've been hurt properly. You're on the line, he says, at last, straightening up. Or rather, the line thinks it's on you. He taps his notebook. Between section 15 and 16, between one promise and another. The book says the river can be ignored. The river says the book can get drowned. We'll side with water, you say, I figured, he answers. No sarcasm. He gestures at the elder's trail as if he's been listening to your yard longer than you've been speaking. There are people who were here before your promises. Their maps don't look like mine. I am not allowed to admit that on paper, but I can admit it under my breath and in the way I register your door. He places his hand on your unfinished lintel. Door claims a future, he says. Your latch will be horn. Good, my mother kept one by the scullery. It didn't bite unless you were impolite. Cade grins. You've got a mother. She writes letters, he says dryly. I write back. That's our treaty. He works a while, placing little flags you hate and love. Hate the presumption. Love the competence. He takes bearings on the cottonwoods, on a giant erratic boulder that thinks it's a sermon, on the ridge notch where storms are born slow. He measures the porch and writes customary, place of exchange in a small script he hopes no one important will read and everyone important will feel. Then he does something you will remember when you tell this to people who didn't live to hear it. He walks to the elder's trail, kneels, and presses his palm in the dust where moccasin prints still sit like quiet decisions. He lifts his hand and prints the shape in his book. Not a number, not a line and acknowledgement. Cade sees it and looks away, as if the moment might break under eye contact. You know you can't fix it from where you sit, Marlowe says. That surveyor nods once. But I can leave splinters in the lies. He takes his coffee black and hot and stares at Silver. That one think he owns you. You snort. He thinks he owns the creek. He allows us to rent a view. Good landlord, the surveyor says. Doesn't raise rent in February. He closes the brass lid. I'm supposed to warn you about squatters, rights, and later claims, and the day a man arrives with a title and a gun and a preacher. Consider yourself warned. He glances at your roof pitch, your sill height, the way you sited the smokehouse so wind won't bully it. Also consider yourself complimented. He hesitates, as if he's balancing something delicate between his teeth, and can't decide whether to let it fall or save it for later. Then he sighs, a sound men make when they choose trouble on purpose. Tomorrow I'll set the section marker in the middle of that bend, he says, and write that the river is the boundary because it is, and because if it ever decides to move again, you'll have bigger problems than me. Thank you, you say don't, he answers. I'm not doing you a favor. I'm doing my job so it doesn't eat me whole. He rolls toward his cart, then pauses. There's a party coming north, he adds. Company men, the kind that like noise. They'll want to know if the porch is theirs. He squints at you. It isn't. Make sure they understand that without making spring angry. Cade props his boot on the step. We know a song the river likes. The surveyor's face almost smiles. Don't sing it to me, he says. I like prose. He mounts, points the bay toward a copse, then looks back once at the roofline he chose to respect. He tips his hat not to you, to the workhand goes. You stand a long time listening to the brass memory of his transit fade. Keats breathes again. Marlowe looks at you sideways. We've got a day, he says. Let's use it. You use it to finish the roof in a way that makes rain jealous. You hang the door. It closes with a sound that is not a thud and not a click, but the third thing that means you and winter shook hands. You build a pier by the cricker proper one, stones wedged, planks sunk, chain-set rings for sleds and pride. You carve a mark in the door, header knot, a name. A line that only you will recognize as the place where you stopped being. A man who survived and started being a man who lived. Evening makes the valley into a bowl of blue. Wolves thread the ridge like punctuation. You and Finn haul the last of the shingles to the stack and then sit on the sill of a window with no glass yet. Legs swinging, men pretending to be boys, pretending to be men. Cade hums that bottle tune from the Sweetwater and gets only half the notes wrong. Marlowe counts heads and chores out loud and old, habit that keeps ghosts from finding chairs to sit in. Jasper reads from the half-book in a voice troopus low. Keats sketches the surveyors, hands ink-stained, competent. A little bruised and, the way they cupped the moccasin print. Sleep comes like forgiveness. You dream of rectangles turning into rivers, and rivers turning into wolves, and wolves turning into roads. Dawn brings noise, not the good kind. Not saws and laughter and creak song, the metal kind pan lids, and spurs, and men who wear their voices like medals. Company riders, 6 of them, wheeling like they own circles. Their foreman Collins would have carried this much swagger if he'd lived to borrow. It leans forward in his saddle so the saddle will know he's important. He takes in the porch, the stake, the red kerchief, the wolves that do not shift, the roof that refuses to be impressed by his hat. He points his chin at the stacked wood. You're on company land, he says. No, you answer evenly. We're on the river. He spits sideways in a way that suggests the ground might appreciate it. Same thing, different math, Marlowe says, behind you. Different consequences, Cade adds, smile easy. Eyes not. The foreman's gaze snags on Silver and tries to decide if killing a wolf will make this place smaller and simpler. The wolf yawns, which is the opposite of permission and looks a lot like a dare. Gentlemen, you say, because when a man brings a hammer, you speak like wood that has already agreed to be a house. We have a porch. It's a place for trading words first, meet second, and trouble never. Step down, drink coffee, or step off, drink dust. One of the riders young nervous, learning what the world does to boys who hang out with men like this, glances up valley, and then at your door, and then at the creek, and makes the first good decision of his season. He dismounts. The foreman glares at him without moving his head. Another man swings down too, because gravity loves company. The foreman doesn't. He rides 2 paces closer. You can't make rules, he says. Winter did. you answer. We just memorized them. He looks like a man deciding whether to like a line of poetry. Then he laughs, hard and wrong. Boys, he says to his men, look at this fool. He thinks he's a magistrate. Cade's voice is sugar over steel. No, friend, he says. He's a homeowner. Silver takes one step forward. Just one. It changes the math of the yard. The horses feel it. The men feel their horses feel it. The foreman feels men feeling horses and knows how quickly a day can get away. You meet his eyes. You let him find there what he came to deny, a line that will not behave like a piece of paper. Behind him, on the ridge, the surveyor sits his bay and watches. He doesn't move. He won't save you. That's not his job. But his presence is a type of witness, and witnesses change the way men choose their next sentence. The foreman chews the inside of his cheek, spits again. Then he leans back in his saddle as if giving the day to someone else. Fine, he says. Drink your coffee. Build your barn. When spring's done and the office says it's ours, we'll come measure your stubborn. You do that, Marlowe says. Bring a cup. The foreman turns his horse. He doesn't look at the porch as he passes it. Men like him don't look at altars unless they're ready to kneel. The two who dismounted climb back up without looking at you. They will tell the story later, in town, and it will have more jokes in it than truth. The riders move off, metal clatter fading into trees. The surveyor lifts 2 fingers. Barely a salute no one can accuse him of. Then he goes to his straight lines rolling behind him like well-behaved thunder. Silence returns, like a tired friend. You exhale the breath you've been counting since dawn. Finn's hand shakes, and he hides it in a pocket like a grown man would. Cade leans his head back and laughs delighted, relieved, offended on behalf of syntax. I hate mornings, he says. They always show up early. You put your palm on the new door. It's warm from sun already. It feels like a living thing you promised to feed. Raise the rafters, you say to no one and everyone. Hang the horn latch. Bring in the table. Tonight we sleep under roof, not just under sky. Silver turns his head toward the high ridge where weather composes itself. Then looks back at you and sneezes the 3rd time. The blessing, no blessing, that has become your favorite omen, if you're still walking this line with us. Drop the river is the boundary in the comments. Parts 11 and 12 bring summer work that tries to turn comfort into rust, a fire that learns your name, and the kind of choice that decides which map your children inherit. Asterisk. Summer arrives like a shy guest who slowly eats everything in your pantry. The meadow fattens. The creek forgets ice and invents laughter. You learn a new verb you didn't think mountains owned, to lays. Of course you don't, but the word glows like a coin at the bottom of clear water nice to see. Even if you can't spend it, work puts on its summer clothes. You rip sod and lay the bones of a garden in a rectangle that disrespects rocks with patience, not argument. Marlowe stakes rows as straight as the surveyor's conscience, then cheats for shade the way old farmers cheat at cards purely decorative, your honor. Beans climb poles. Squash anchor corners like doorstops. Corn pretends to be a cavalry. Keats, who never figured plants could be persuaded by poetry, reads seed packets aloud like they're love letters. The soil, being older than letters and love, listens anyway. Jorma shows Finn how to swing a scythe without swinging his back. Cut low, breathe with the blade. Sharpen when you feel dumb, that's the rule. They lay windrows in the hay meadow, with a rhythm you could hear from Wyoming. Jasper ties bundles with willow withes, and a private whistle he'd probably got from a bird that felt generous. Cade rigs a simple derrick over the hayrick, the rope humming a tune that, if you squint, is the same one he hums when a fight is likely and he's happy about it. You put the cabin through its paces. The horn latch doesn't bite in heat. The roof throws an afternoon shower into shape without complaint drip lines right where you told them to be, not where they wanted. The hearth draws. The smokehouse behaves like a small church, quiet worship, agreeable incense, congregation mostly venison. The root cellared onto the knoll, walled with dry stone, roofed with timber, thatched with sawders, cool enough to keep butter shy and potatoes honest. You line shelves with new jars. May traded you glass luminous as a saved land practice packing. Beats so tight they can't remember how to misbehave. Orin writes back from the lowlands in a hand that has learned the courage it takes to put a thought in the right order. He reports that Ms. Cunningham scares figures straight and that he can now diagram a sentence so well even Cade would agree to it. He says the chapel bell sounds like a small mountain trying hard. He says he dreams of wolves who correct him kindly. You read the letter aloud on the porch. Finn nods with a face that can't decide if pride or longing deserves the front seat. The surveyor returns once early July to set the section marker where he said the center of the bendan to pretend badly that he's here for salmonberries. He brings news folded into his polite. Office ratified my notes, he says, eyes on the river like it's taking attendance. They stamped the boundary as water. That buys you time. Not forever, the paper never learns its lesson entirely, but long enough for a roof to become a roof in someone else's ledger. You thank him without saying those words. He drinks coffee like a man who knows bitterness is a flavor, not a complaint, and then vanishes the way rectangles do when the day has too many curves. The wolves shed their winter names and invent summer. One's quieter, browner, more about shade. Silver becomes a lope through willows. Shadow becomes the negative space between two sunbeams. Pups appear for with feet so big you can almost hear their future. Finn tries not to name them. Fails twice. Keeps the failures to himself, which is how boys become men in these parts. For 3 weeks, it's all routine and gratitude and the sound of diminishing piles turning into stacks. Then the mountains remember combustion. It starts with a sky that refuses to sweat. Afternoon, heat standing in the meadow like an audience, clouds too high to be guilty. You taste metal, that flavor that's half memory and half forecast. Out on the southern ridge, lightning throws a forked insult nobody deserves. You count. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, too many Mississippis, and then a moth-wing smear of smoke lifts from the pines like a secret that's tired of keeping itself. Cade sees it first and doesn't say a word. He puts down his hammer, picks up a shovel, and looks at you the way men look at each other when the day just chose teams. North draw, he says. If she runs there, we keep her out of the creek's wind. If she jumps the cut, we make her forget our names. Marlowe is already filling barrels hoops, groaning, staves swelling. Jasper drags wet tarps to the porch and drapes them over rails like giant tongues. Keats grabs the shovel with the best blade and a canteen heel forget to drink. Finn stands very still, the way boys do when a story is about to test if they're ready to listen. You don't pray so much as you plan out loud in a meter. Older than any psalm, wet the shakes. Soak the sill. Scatter the brush at the fence. Pack the cellar with what spoils and what you can't stand to lose. If it's a thing you can carry and cry about later, carry it now. If it's a thing that can burn and teach us something by doing it, bless it on the way. Asterisk, the smoke finds its grown-up speed before you find your hat. The wind draws a line down the draw and invites the fire to walk it. It does. Its crown fire in patches skips, preheats, leaps. Its ground fire in others, low and malicious. The sound is a language without vowels. You mistake it for train thunder once, and then never again. It carries embers like unkind stars. Silver appears with the pack. Not at the ridge this time, but at your shoulders, distance to close for anyone's manual. He looks at the draw, looks at your woodpile, looks at the strip you cut in spring around the cabin like a moat that doesn't believe in water. He's impatient with you, but not unkind. Like a friend who taught you this dance and now has to watch you remember the steps. You split into teams, because teams are how men admit they're small without feeling smaller. Cade, Jolmare, and Keats cut a wet line on the north side down to mineral soil. To spade widths, throw the duff downhill where it will do less harm. Marlowe and Jasper slam wet sacking against the wall where the wind will shove sparks to flirt with gaps. Finn and you work the roof, hauling sloshing buckets up the ladder and not dying mostly by agreement. The first embers arrive like lazy hornets glow. Catch, think about it. Get erased by your hat before they can remember their chore. The foreman who laughed at your porch shows up at a hard gallop with 2 men and a face that understands fuel load now. He doesn't say I'm sorry, and you don't need him to. Not today. He grabs a shovel and cuts beside Cade, and, for an hour, you respect him without adjusting your cosmology. The surveyor arrives behind him with a gunny sack full of nothing helpful and 2 hands that can carry more buckets than the sack pretended. He doesn't apologize either. He just moves in concert with the fact of it. Fire does the math. Your bear strip scalped in spring because you didn't trust Laquisant wide enough to make a general happy, but it's wide enough to make a flame second guess its enthusiasm. Where it tries to jump, the wind shifts like a teacher's eyebrow and pushes it back into the lesson plan. Heat slaps your face with the intimacy of a lie that wants to be believed. Smoke clots in your throat and finds a door you didn't know was there. Then a cottonwood explodes downstream Rodden Heart. Dry crown and throws a bouquet of sparks over your line and toward the smokehouse. You see them like arithmetic you don't like. Trajectory, windage, thatch. You run using new muscles. Finn is already there, hat stomping, hands bare, the kind of brave that ends jobs and starts funerals. You yell, not at him, at the sky. The first shakes catch. You lay your wet tarp and press with your whole past. The air turns to soup you don't want to taste. Someone swears with words that learned their trade on boats. The smokehouse decides to live. You sit hard enough to earn a bruise next month. Hours are elastic. Fire seasons them with dread and vinegar. It runs and fails and runs again. You run and fail and run again. The creek is a friend on loan. The garden looks ridiculous green, wet, believing in fall while the world burns. The wolves work the flank opposite your line, running deer out of pockets and away from deadfall that wants to make their names into ash. You don't know if wolves can do trio. You learn that they can. Late sun lowers its shoulder. Heat has done what heat came to do and is bored by itself. The wind's attention wanders. The ridge smoke thins. The draw smoulders in a way that looks like regret. The fire line holds with little inward sighs you imagine are thanks. night not dark so much as orange arrives. You walk the line with a wet burlap and a stick for rolling logs that think they're still invited. Cade moves like a man whose dilemmas weigh the same as his body, and he's okay with that. Marlowe's breath sours, and he loves that about it, because it means it's still his. Keats' eyebrows are gone, and he claims he never liked them anyway. Finn shakes so hard his words rattle. You put a hand on his neck, and the muscles there choose to believe you. The foreman stands under a blackened pine, shovel point planted, head down as if listening to a small sermon. He looks at you, and you see a man who has updated the file where he kept you. Porch, he says, still yours. It's both apology and invitation. You nod because you will not spend mercy on theatre. The surveyor leans on the well and grins, a grin that has earned itself. Water boundary, he says softly, like a man tucking a stubborn detail into bed. Some things are stubborn on our side, too. He takes off his hat, and your eyes discover the shape of his head is exactly how it should be. At midnight, a thunderhead finally keeps a promise. Rain arrives with that rodeo mix of swagger and apology. It hisses, it makes mud where you wanted powder. It cools your roof into reason. Finn laughs like a boy who didn't die and can't quite believe it. Wolves stand in it and shake once, precisely. You take inventory under a porch that now smells like wet ash and boiled hope. You lost fence, brush, sweat. You saved roof, cellar, maps that live behind your eyes. You kept the smokehouse. You kept the garden. You kept the part of yourself that remembers how to decide fast without becoming a fool. The meadow wears black polka dots on green char patches like punctuation you'll read in winter dot. And then, in the quiet that arrives only after things have been louder than they should, you hear it, the very small new song of water dripping off a leaf that shouldn't have survived and did. You sit down on the step because standing would be extravagant. Cade hands you a tin cup of crick with a dash of whiskey the rain approves. Marlowe counts blessings and losses and decides the balance point is honest. Keats draws the fire line in the air with his finger and names it. Where the day chose us back, silver settles in the damp grass just past reach. Head on pause, ears in that lazy angle that means he can be a statue until a statue wouldn't help. He looks at you without drama. You look back and don't thank him because he's not a creature who needs our kinds of gratitude. You lift the cup instead. He blinks. Good ritual. Morning reveals what night promised. A blackened collar around your valley like carefully applied eyeliner. The drawer will grow mushrooms now. The burned pine will feed woodpeckers and later be a good lesson about ladders. The air smells like a barbecue that fell in love with a library. You breathe it like medicine by noon. You're back to work because that's the only superstition that paid you all year. You rebuild fence with ash on your wrists. You drag brush into piles shaped like tomorrow's caution. You talk no bigger about it than necessary, but when Finn leans into you a little as he passes, you lean back. That night, the stars return to their rightful jobs. The roof ticks soft. The cabin, which has now been introduced to fire as an enemy and as a friend, sighs a new sound, a contentment sound with edges. You put your hand on the sill and feel the wet wood cooling into resolve. If this chapter made your knuckles itch in a good way, drop, hold the line, soak the shakes in the comments. Tomorrow we cut winter wood as if February had already written us a letter. After that, part 12, a choice about maps paper and blood and the first cold breath of a new year. Testing what you've built. Asterisk, the first leaf that turns is a liar. It reddens in mid-August. a show-off, a prophet, or a prankster, depending on the hour. Finn brings it back like proof that time still works. You pin it over the hearth because a good warning is a decoration if you love it fast. Enough. Summer's last weeks are a ledger you don't argue with. You stack, you split, you stack again, you sight down the chords like rifle barrels. 20 days of wood was the old math. You build 30 because fire is greedy and because spring likes to brag it outstayed its welcome. The stacks get their own names first: snow, wolf moon, the storm you out. The storm that likes jokes. Finn paints small marks on end grain, nothing fancy. Just a moon shape to help sleepy hands. Garden becomes pantry. Keats lines jars like a stained glass, hymn beats like bruised rubies. Pickles green as minor chords. Peaches that shock you into remembering summer can be held. May rides up with news, help, and an air that says she left town because town was a room with mirrors. She inspects your cellar like a commander touring men she loves too much to be obvious about it. She approves your sacks of potatoes with a grunt that is the difference between life and laughter. She teaches Finn how to braid onions so they look like arguments no one is allowed to end. Jasper hangs an iron kettle over the hearth and calls it soup for 6 nights running. You don't complain. He packs flavor like a customs agent who believes in mercy. Marlowe oils every tool that thinks it's more important than it is, because tools grow arrogant when they're essential. Cade disappears twice with a pack and comes back with information. Game trails heavy on the east slope. A new wind throw, perfect for rope lessons. A stand of birch that will surrender bark without writing you a bill. The surveyor's letter comes on the back of a freight wagon, delivered by a boy who expects a tip and leaves with bread instead. The letter is brief in his careful hand. The office has begun drafting deeds for claims along your run. He writes that your boundary water has been noted exactly as field marked, but interested parties want a resurvey come spring for consistency. He underlines that word twice. He adds, I've filed 2 affidavits that will annoy people who need annoying. Expect a man with a pen and an unnecessary chin. There's a postscript in ink that smudge the way anger does. If you can, find witnesses who remember before paper. The foreman rides in the next day, hat in hand, literally. He hasn't joined a church, but the chin is less unnecessary than before. He looks at the fire-black ring on the ridge and the rebuilt line and the stacks of wood that say, these people intend to keep being people. He sighs, which is a language you've both learned to translate. Company lawyers coming snow or no snow, he says. Thinks a deed is a document you can lay on a river and make it carry your boots. We have a porch, you say. He nods. I told him that. He asked if porches can sign things. I said yes, if they're built right. The foreman rubs the back of his neck. He'll try to buy you. Then he'll try to scare you. After that, he'll try to be clever. If you're still smiling, he'll try to be friendly. My advice, let him think he invented the part where you win. Why are you helping us? Finn blurts, because sometimes the shortest road is a question you shouldn't ask. The foreman looks at the boy, then at you, then out at the cottonwoods that made a cathedral by accident. Because I like it when men put their backs where their mouths are, he says. And because that fire made me pick a side. I didn't know I had. He rides off with a half salute that would fall apart if you breathed on it. You leave it in the air unbreathed. Cade decides you need a meeting that isn't about food or nails. He whistles the signal for the elder and the signal for the surveyor and the signal. for the kind of night where words act like tools. At dusk, the porch holds more story than lumber. The Ute elder, wrapped in memory and dusk. The surveyor with his hat correct and his notebook checked. May with bread that will reset any argument to hungry. Marlowe with coins of information he flips. Keats with papers for sketching faces if the faces try to hide. Jasper with coffee that has opinions. Finn with a sharpened stick and a conscience. You, Cade, leaning on the rail like a man who has never respected a rail enough not to. You lay it out clean. Deeds coming. Boundaries like nets. An office far away that has never been cold at dawn in this valley and thinks it can name it anyway. The elder listens with an expression you're learning to recognize. The look men wear when they have already outlived a problem and are willing to outlive it again, if that's what the young need from them. He speaks in a voice that picks cherries from silence. Before your paper, there was a river, he says. Before your river, there was a story about a river. Before the story, there was a winter that taught men to listen. I am not here to tell you where to put your door. I am here to tell you that when a man comes with a paper, hand him water and ask if the paper drinks. The surveyor clears his throat, embarrassed by a profession that sometimes forgets to be humble. I can testify to custom, he says. To usage. To improvements made in good faith. To community recognition. Courts like those words when they can't ignore them. He taps his notebook. I can put that porch into record by accident. May slices, bread, and law at the same time. Men eat better when their mouths are busy, she says. We'll feed the lawyer. We'll make him respect the stove before he respects the map. If he still won't. We'll let the elder remind him what winter does to men who don't like porches. She passes the butter like a gavel. You decide it there. Without theatrics, no sale. No surrender, no shouting unless the river requests it. Witnesses will be present. Coffee will be strong. The horn latch will be admired. The elder will sit where his silence is loudest. You will speak plain and not pretty. If the lawyer tries to split the difference between water and paper, you will hand him a pail and invite him to bail the creek dry. If he refuses, you'll know his measure. He arrives a week later with a coat that thinks it's two kinds of important and a smile that belongs to a man who thinks he can swap you for yourself. He introduces himself as Pickering, as if a surname named after daylight could help in a valley that belongs to moon. He sees the porch, the stacks, the roof, the fire scars, the wolves at the far shade written in grey cursive. He adjusts his hat like punctuation. Charming, he says, which is a word men use when they don't know the word for earned. You pour coffee. Marlowe lists improvements like ammunition. Keats lays down a rough map Riverbend correct as a scar. Cabin where cabins belong. Smokehouse backed by common sense. Garden in a shape that wins arguments slowly. Pickering sets out his papers like a dealer. He speaks of grants and patents and sections terms that sound fine when a room has wallpaper. He draws a rectangle that overlaps your cabin the way a careless man overlaps conversation. He says a phrase, quiet enjoyment, like it's his to give. He smiles at the elder as if the elder were a quaint spoon. The elder doesn't move, which counts more than moving. He reaches into a pouch and sets a small stone on the table river polished. Red streak through grey like a sentence through law. He says one sentence in his own language. He doesn't translate it. Pickering looks at the stone and pretends not to. The surveyor clears his throat. Customary use, he says, voice steady. Porch used as market and council. Cabin built with intention to remain. Fire break, cut. Flood managed. Witnesses present. He looks at Pickering over the rim of his cup. If you put this in front of a judge worth his chair, you'll lose. Pickering smiles the smile men use when they've learned how to lose without lowering their fees. Judges are men, he says. Men like paper, men like winter less, May says sweetly, and puts another slice of bread on his plate with the force of a delivered verdict. You don't grandstand. You do the thing you promised yourself the day Orin walked away. You speak the map you live by. We measure by water, you tell him. We measure by the way smoke travels in January, by how a door faces storms, by who bled where and who said thank you afterward. We don't measure by a box somebody drew on a desk that never felt a nail. You gesture toward the ridge ring. The fire made a boundary too. It says we belong here because we showed up when it asked us to. Pickering chews. Bread demands honesty. Butter greases a truth your mouth otherwise wouldn't risk. He taps his papers into polite stacks. We can offer a lease, he says, while the matter is under review. Nominal fee. A gesture that keeps everyone's noses clean. You're offering rent on the sky, Cade says, not unkindly. We already pay. Pickering looks at Silver, at the elder, at the surveyor's calm, at May's bread, at Finn's set jaw. He looks at the horn latch, touches it, yelps softly when the winter memory in the horn surprises his fingers. He looks at the porch. Board sees the pores of the wood where conversation's soaked in. He looks at the river. It keeps doing the only thing it knows, moving forward while appearing to stay where it is. Very well, he says, at last. We'll file a notice of adverse possession leaning on custom and improvements. We'll request a stay on patent. We'll consider water. He folds his papers. He tucks away a rectangle that doesn't fit here. He stands, lighter by an idea. I will not promise your victory, he adds. A man who has learned something about the weather and is trying to be noble about it. But I will promise not to be the reason you lose. The elder sets a second stone next to the first wind commas. He nods once. Ritual complete. Pickering departs with a courtesy that could be mistaken for respect if you were tired enough. Maybe it is respect. Let it be. The day afterward belongs to axes and decisions you can hold. You march into fall with a cadence older than flags. You teach Finn the trick of reading bark to know whether a split will show you grace or require a song. Keats inks a poster in town. Winter wood at Blackwood porch, fair trade. Fair stories. He draws a wolf in the corner small enough to be a joke and large enough to be taken seriously by anyone with sense. Frost visits one night and shakes your roof to see who answers. You do. You bank the stove and set the kettle where waking up is possible. You hang blankets on the porch as if you're set dressing your own legend. You bolt the shutters and leave one cracked because watching a storm arrive is educational. The first real snow comes honest no sneak. Grey sky, a hush that turns even Cade's humming into handwriting. Finn runs a hand out to catch flakes like he's reading Braille and learning the mountain's new chapter. Silver appears and disappears against white like punctuation ellipse, comma. Dash dot winter returns you to the litany that makes Ruth's church. Tend the fire. Melt the snow, ration like a poet. Check the traps within a shout of the door. So what needs not to fail, oil what needs to be patient. Talk to yourself until you're boring and then try being kind. The smokehouse breathes secrets again. The cellar hugs, it's cold. The cabin accepts new noises, sice cracking in the bucket. Roof timbers gossiping about wind. Storm 3 is the test this time. The one that stacks drifts against the door like unpaid bills. You dig out with your whole name. You pull the door open the way men pull themselves through memory. You check the wood and see the marks fall moon. The storm that likes joke sand. Move the newest chord closer to the fire with a gratitude you don't say out loud because you want it to stay. Big. 1 pre-dawn. Wind throws a handful of glass at the cabin ice crystals that stick to the oiled paper window like 1,000 tiny lies. You get up anyway. Habit is a faith that has earned itself. You lay the kindling like a sentence with no wasted words. The flame takes, grows, becomes a grammar everyone trusts. Finn stirs under his blanket. "We're okay," he mumbles. A boy who now understands okay miracles aren't loud. You answer like a man who has winter's number on a piece of paper above the mantel. We are, at first light, wolves sing, not hunger, not warning. A check-in. You answer with the sound of a shovel, the steam of stew, the door opening inward because you built it true. Out in the white, the elder's trail is visible, still pressed into the season like a signature that snow can't quite manage to edit. You think of Orin down valley, the chapel bell insisting on seconds, Ms. Cunningham angling words straight. You think of Pickering, his coat learning humility one porch at a time. You think of the surveyor, riding winter with lines in his head that water is already improving. You think of Cade, who left and returned and keeps his saddle where the porch can see it. You think of May, who will show up with broth the day your voice cracks wrong. You think of Marlowe and Jasper and Keats and George, men whose names are tools and songs both. You think of Silver, whose tracks come to the edge of the clearing and stop, because there are borders even wolves like, and he has the courtesy to pretend they're real when he's a guest. On the table is a scrap of paper Keats left a sketch of the valley like a wish a cartographer decided to take seriously. In the margin he wrote a line that you didn't hear him say, map of a place, drawn by the people who survived it. You add beneath in your square hand, boundary, river, porch, memory, snow keeps coming. You let it. You tend the flame with kindness and discipline. You ration the good coffee until a feast day arrives in your chest. You open the door for the wind once, just to show it you remember who's in charge. You go back inside, because wisdom is a warm habit. You teach Finn to check the north wall by sound alone, knuckles tapping timber like a stethoscope for weather. He laughs the second time. He doesn't the third. Learning. When sleep takes you these nights, it does so with a softness earned by hard choices. The dream is simple now. A roof that nods to weather. A creek that forgives and forgets and remembers all at once. A porch where men and wolves and laws have to look each other in the face. In the dream, the river writes the map, and the map learns how to speak. When morning wakes you with the smell of frost and the sigh of settling snow and tick of a stove that still has opinions, you say the first sentence of winter out loud to the room that helped you write it, another day of not dying, and then you make it more than that: wood, water, work, words, you. Push your chair back from the table and let the day start with your back, not your mouth, if this series kept you warm. Drop river, porch, memory in the comments. Share it with somebody who thinks winter is just a season and not a teacher. And if you want the full set stitched into one long frontier lullaby, say the word, we'll bind it like a good roof, tight, honest, and ready for weather. Asterisk.